All right, we're live. So we're going to do another episode of recaps, and we've ended the last discussion or recap where the Battle of the Twins had occurred, and essentially the prince had called upon the power of sunlight through a never before seen power of discipline of sorts, which the PCs and the coterie will get to know a lot more details later. But we're going to switch gears a little bit at this point in time. John ended up taking over as the storyteller, and so we'll let him take it from there.
When he turns his mic back on.
When he's good and ready, Rusty. When he's good and ready. I was just trying to find the page of my in my notes here, since they are exhaustive, but not necessarily organized in any particular fashion, as any good RPG notes should be. Okay, so let me see. So we left off with the subjugation of the twins. And at this time, if I recall correctly, and I'm getting my head back in the game here, so a little recap was, at this point, the coterie had been working for Tabitha Hill by this time under a couple of different missions. And so the block where I took over started with a call from Tabitha Hill for the coterie to come in and meet, at which point she turned them over to a new handler for a short stint while she had nothing official for them, and was seemingly uncomfortable with the whole arrangement. A man named Diego Oliveira, who professed to be the day man for the prince, or a code name for his ghoul fixer of sorts. And actually, I take that back. Diego himself showed up at the door, and Tabitha Hill informed the coterie that they would be working with him, and he had an assignment for them. So, Aaron, I don't know how you wanna do the discussion. I don't wanna lead the whole thing and give everybody a chance. So, how do you guys wanna do that?
Well, also, incidentally, when that all happened, we got introduced to a new character, Riley, correct?
Well, so Riley would come in. I think you guys did a couple of sessions without me, didn't you? Because I think there was some reason. I think I got I wasn't able to make a couple sessions if I recall correctly.
It was in the middle. So Riley was there. Riley was there the day we started with Aaron as a player and me as the storyteller. So, and unbeknownst maybe to the rest of the players, there was a little bit of side conversation introducing Riley with Cedar, with Ringo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Riley's character is so. This is the first time the coterie had really engaged too much with Riley, other than Cedar, and so Cedar, and we talked about this in the last game, where Cedar, provided his card, right? So he had provided his card to a number of people, so we assumed it'd be fine, if he had provided his card to other people from his quote unquote past, and so Riley came in as a gangrel that he had known from, what was it, West Virginia or something was the story, and so for her part, I mean, I guess we'll let it go for a little while, but unbeknownst to the coterie, Riley was actually the werewolf magus that Cedar had met in the park when Ward was trying to gather all of his materials. And so it really was kind of a decision for me. Do I want to rehash some old character, or do I want to just play something and kind of enrich the story and all the characters we had already made, and maybe really explore one avenue? And I thought that this was kind of a thread that I wanted to pull on, since it had interested Cedar and some of the, and Ward and whatnot, who were watching from like, the treetops or whatever from afar, when they were having their initial conversation. But I figured this was kind of the most that we could get out of an NPC. So I kind of took over the NPC as a player character for a while, and played her. And so we'll just say right off the bat, like I said, she's actually a werewolf, which played into a lot of sort of the aspects, but none of the players knew. Even so, Ringil knew, but he didn't tell any of their coterie mates, and the only one that really knew was John for a while. And she played it off well because she has partial transformation, so she can do the claws, and she could do other things, which we'll talk about later, as we kind of go through the investigation as a part of the story. But I thought it would be kind of fun to see how long I could go and have her just pretend to be a part, a vampire that's just sort of there visiting, and no one's any of the wiser, really. But she got heavily involved in major politics within the DC area, as we'll discuss. So anyway, that was a really fun kind of role playing, lots of little role playing details. But she's definitely a new entry, kind of a street rat kind of skater girl. Low. Doesn't really care too much about her appearance, low appearance, good manipulation though, good skills, and pretty somewhat physical. She's for her part, she's a Matus, Shadow Lord, Ragabash. So basically, she's kind of like a rogue of sorts within the werewolf world. And so she plays that very well. And but she had had an abusive streak where she needed to disappear for a while and let things kind of cool off with another pack that's been tormenting her from the beginning, and the players actually met that other pack, and would meet them later. But sorry to hijack everything, but just trying to put the pieces all sort of in play. And the only one really that knew this would have been, Ringil and of course John as a storyteller. So anyway, that was Riley. So she sort of appeared and was like, "Hey, you guys are doing an investigation. I'm really good at finding things," and she is, from her gifts. Her magical powers that the werewolves use, as opposed to disciplines. They're like the equivalent of disciplines in the werewolf world. Different though, granted by spirits and whatnot. So she's very good at like finding, hiding, that sort of thing. So her skills were pretty well used. Anyway, that's Riley.
There were a number of hints that we should have paid more attention to that she was a werewolf. Every time she used a discipline, I think Aaron said, it looks just, a little bit different. It's not something you're used to with normal celerity or whatever she was doing at the time. So yeah. I just like...
It was pretty fascinating too. That's absolutely right too, because it was like celerity, right? But it's rage. So... it looks like I'm furious, and there was actually a really fun play into that at a later point where I think we'll just kind of go into it since we're on the topic. But later on, Heinrich wanted Riley to teach him celerity, and for her part, the cat was still in the bag. We got probably well into, I don't know, 3/4 of the way through the story before people kind of. We're like, oh crap. But at that point, nobody knew. And so she was like, well, this vampire is asking me, and I really like this, these guys. And I don't know, let's see if a werewolf can teach, a vampire new tricks. And I thought that was probably one of the most fun ways that a discipline had ever been picked up. Because ultimately you learned it, right? You learned the discipline. But it made it so that we tapped into the beast form, into your like frenzying. And so you were like having to almost go to the point of frenzy and having to roll for it in order to be able to activate your blood in a way that made you activate celerity, essentially.
Yeah, it was cool. It was a pretty creative way to play that situation. And I think I took a fault for that, I think, called, which I think you made up, it's called short fuse. And whenever I'm trying to use celerity, I have to roll to check if I'm going to frenzy. So
that was a little bit of homebrew that Aaron and I polished up together. We just adopted the original flaw of short fusion, just a standard penalty to frenzying, but kind of adopted it specifically for the circumstances that you sort of were learning it under. Like you're learning to fly into a berserker rage almost, which for a werewolf sounds great, but for a vampire is a little bit more of a loss of control. So we modified it slightly for your specific training.
Yeah, that was neat.
So we kind of kicked off that little side story with a truly inside story fashion with the coterie being handed off to this new handler for a special job on behalf of the prince, but a quieter job than one that would be directly given, say, by the sheriff normally. Something given by the dayman is something that is not publicly given. But just before he showed up, they had a surprise visitor in the form of Riley being introduced to the group by Ringo as his out-of-town friend, which you should always be suspicious of your out-of-town vampire friend.
Especially
lesson learned. Yeah, they don't travel often, and they don't just pop in for a visit. I'd be suspicious. And so we kicked that off with a kind of an ambiguous mission to investigate a supposed werewolf attack. So the Tremere facility at Dumbarton Oaks, the museum in DC, had been assaulted by a pack of werewolves, apparently, or that was the public story. And while the Tremere, of course, are very secretive and were keeping handling the investigation into how that occurred themselves, it was reasonable for the prince to send some people to kind of, do some digging, since he was very involved in the werewolf situation in DC and had vested interest in, seeing what was going on. But that was the public face to it. And so in private, the dayman had actually tasked the coterie with retrieving something that was stolen from the Tremere at the time of the assault. And unfortunately didn't know a whole lot about what it was they were sent to retrieve. They were supposed to basically go and feel around to see, what was really going on. Which kind of led them into sort of an investigation that ended up, I think, being not what they expected the actual job to be.
Yeah, and that was the prince wanting us to come in sort of on his behalf, right? To do the investigation on the Tremere, and Ward being pretty much our only contact within the Tremere, was otherwise engaged with some other tasking. So that's how we kind of wrote him, out of this particular story. Although, he would come in to play a little bit as an NPC as well.
And I will say on that little side bit, at that time, that actually led us to later on issues. Ward actually was tasked with working directly with the Chantry, the main Chantry, which is actually at a different facility entirely in DC, and was tasked with working with them to research the black gem that was recovered from the serial killer Evan. Yep. Because apparently it housed some sort of, the Tremere, of course, were tasked with any sort of magical inquiry into it, and come to find out it apparently housed some sort of entity or power that caused an apprentice of the Tremere to run away with it. And so he was tasked with hunting it down, teaming up with a pair of characters from a previous game, Timothy and Cade.
Yep, and just those are FYI characters of mine. It was one of the characters I was debating on playing instead of Riley, but decided on Riley because of the power level differences. Riley being basically equivalent to the characters, Timothy being an elder at that point, and same with Cade. But basically, Timothy is a multiple personality Malkavian that prior kinfolk, and he's an elder with heavy. He's been involved in demonic issues before, where he had been basically trapped in purgatory and marked for going down into hell. As basically punishment from one of the demons from for his actions going against the demon. It wasn't necessarily he did anything demonic himself, other than opposing the demon. The demon basically saying, "Ha, I've trapped you, and I'm gonna continue to have you trapped." And Timothy ultimately getting out. Cade being you could talk quickly about Cade if you want. Rusty, I won't steal your thunder there.
Yeah, no worries. No, Cade is an Assamite. He elder, along with Timothy. They were in a previous game that lasted quite a while, and because of the trade off that we're going to do, when Aaron decided to bring back Timothy, the backstory behind them two is that Cade undertook Timothy as his son because a 12-year-old because the FBI was investigating first of all. So a 12-year-old vampire breaks the masquerade like a motherfucker. So
amazing. It just doesn't age.
Right. So Cade took him on and went through the adoption process to make it all legal, and he does care for him like a son. But at the same time, he also looks to Timothy as a confidant too, because it's not just Timothy in there. He's got, is it 9? It's 9 total personalities, or is it 7? I couldn't remember.
Yeah, it's 8 now.
8. 8. So
each coming out each night, essentially, and there's certain stimulus that can trigger. And they all interact with the base personality, which is actually, Timothy Carpenter, who was basically a Civil War era child that was going to succumb to influenza, ended up going into a traveling hospital and basically left by his parents because they couldn't bear it anymore. And then his sire was a Malkavian doctor, basically in charge of the traveling medical office. And embraced him. And for a while, his derangement was basically he still thought he was sick and acted as if he was under the effects of pretty severe influenza. And then eventually, though, he kind of came into his own, and then he got captured by vampire hunters and for whatever reason was basically locked into a box and then thrown into the Mississippi River, where he'd stay for hundreds of years. In torpor until he basically found himself in, the 90s, and, in a warehouse in, northern Louisiana, having been dredged up from the river and then, for some reason woke up, with nobody around and fled, once he had his strength about him, and then trying to basically, learn his ways in the new world, for him. So, met up with the coterie in Detroit, and that's where also Blaupunkt, who's Ben's character, his old character for that coterie, was, and they were all kind of together and did some fun stuff. But decided to put them in there. They don't play too major of a role until a little bit later on. They play somewhat of a role, but it's just kind of fun tying all the stories together, and doing it all in the same universe is always kind of fun. And for everybody. So, and then seeing kind of what they become or whatever, with Timothy being, most of his personalities being pretty one-track minded towards going after demonic entities, which is why they were consulted. They had just gone through, in the story, a demonic purge in New York, where they had found basically a demon that was taking over or causing kind of physical havoc, and not too adept at doing its possession, but they ended up kind of quote unquote banishing a demon called Carnarius, and what ended up happening though is not actually him being banished, and we'll talk about that later. But anyway, so these two characters were working with Ward because of the demonic influence, and those characters had heavy ties in with the Tremere in Detroit on the same topic, which is why it was an easy tie-in to bring, these two characters in particular now down from New York to DC, where, Ward would meet them at the airport. And I went through that whole, side conversation or whatever with John and Ward as his character. So,
yeah. Yeah. So Cade. So like I said, Cade cares for him not only as his son, but as he's got a family all in this one little package, right? He's got well now like you said 8 personalities, but 7 for sure that
he doesn't like relies that on one.
Them. No, not neither does Cade certainly does not.
You
like
might not like Jethro either. that
he tolerates Jethro. He tolerates Jethro.
Yeah, Jethro is a serial killer sharecropper, by the way, who murdered a bunch of families supposedly, and was hunted down by the law and basically executed on the shores where his spirit ran into the medium Timothy, who is a medium. While he was sealed in the box and then basically incorporated him into his personality is the story that Timothy would tell you. Whether it's just his insanity or not is up to anyone's guess on that one.
There had been many a time where Cade had to be like, nope, get don't you do that, Jethro, God damn it, kind of thing.
So I'm going to steer us away from the Tim and Cade show because that was a small portion. No, it's okay. You guys are good. There's just a lot of history there, and we haven't even started with the rest of the stuff.
That'll be a rabbit hole.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. So I would rather hear, as the storyteller, I would rather hear what the players take on the side story was, and interject my just little side bits of information that may be forgotten or overlooked. But I think it'd be more interesting to hear from the players. So if whoever wants to sort of take it away, basically your mission was given to you to go to the Dumbarton Oaks facility. You were expected. You were there ostensibly on behalf of the sheriff. That was the public story. You're there just to look into this werewolf attack. But the prince specifically tasked you on the side with recovering whatever it was the Tremere were not telling people was taken, and discovering what that was. But apparently the Dayman wasn't privy to that information either. So you were just supposed to figure it out as you go. Need to know basis only.
Wasn't that when we got invited to the big party? Isn't that? That later.
Well, that's jumping ahead.
That was later.
No.
We did go to the facility because we needed to obviously do our investigation.
Right.
That's right. So this was the first time we visited the facility. Yeah. So we went to go and investigate, and I guess I'll kick it off too on my side. But from Riley's perspective, she's just kind of absolutely enamored with this whole other world that. Normally she's been taught to hate, and just on its face. But she has such a dislike of her own people because of what happens to her on a monthly basis with that other pack. That she's kind of found this guy who's willing to kind of take her in, and she's like, well, I'm kind of screwed either way, and I'm sort of tired of dealing with this life anyway. I don't mind kind of being around leeches for a while. She has a Karen that she has to tend to, which is part of her backstory, why she's tied to this area. But, she's basically there wide-eyed and bushy-tailed and kind of taking it all in and just acting like for her, it was acting. It was like, I'm going to, be a part of this investigation team that's here for something called the Prince. I don't know. It sounds important. And so she's going to go and follow along, tag along. And all these people in the Tremere are like looking at her and like wide eyed and be like, cause she can't hide her aura yet. So, people probably saw her and knew, and I think John can confirm that, people probably knew, but she was so integrated with the group on this, for this task, and the Prince had told everybody, it's like, basically this is my team. You treat them with utter, respect, give them what they need, and then we'll be done with this investigation. So I thought it was kind of fun that way.
One of the first things that happened when you showed up at the Dumbarton Oaks facility, there was actually a big tell there, but the coterie didn't pick up on that particular one. Does anybody remember what that was?
Wasn't that when we went in and met I don't know what she was, some sort of... God, what the hell was she? I don't remember, but she had us all in the room and she stopped and looked at Riley and was like, got big, like eyes the size of saucers and was like, about to say something. And Riley was like,
Wasn't that at the museum?
So there were two big tells. The first big tell was that the gate guard definitely looked her up and down. And of course, you can assume any Tremere facility is going to be chock full of Auspex users. So he definitely looked her up and down, and then called it in, confirmed that they were expecting you, and then proceeded to disable a ward that was on the gates on the door. He actually marred the ward to disable it, to allow her to pass, because it was a ward against lupines that would have prevented her from passing the threshold.
Yep.
That's right.
And he was instructed to let them in, including apparently whoever this werewolf was with them. He's not rank enough to question that. So he disabled a ward, and he very demonstratively, he turned and marked the handle, or actually rubbed away some markings on the handle of the door. But didn't really explain himself. So that was one little hint that was thrown out there. Is like, hey, well, that was weird. And then when you came in, you did meet Beatrix Fairweather, and she was the sort of the managerial, administrative person at the facility, in charge of the day-to-day more than anything. And she actually got a small amount of blood from each of you to sample it to confirm who you were. And not enough to keep on file or anything, but it was an actual physical pony up a little drop of blood here and now, and so she knew exactly what Riley was as well.
And that was Cedar was going to say something too.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Well, yeah, I was just going to basically state that I was the gate guard, as well as the lady that was just inside the door who tested her blood and looked at us.
Cedar, you muted yourself, bud.
I can hear him.
Didn't see him. No.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can hear him.
Mm-hmm. And then
what the hell? Why do I have muted? Sorry.
Can you hear me?
I can now.
Oh, okay. Jeez, you don't want to listen to me. So then after that, I think we went and looked at the cameras first, I think, was it?
So you bounced around the investigation, and without necessarily hitting every detail, it was a combination of you inspected the grounds behind the outside in the garden area. Yeah. Where the attack took place. They had come over a wall that was heavily warded, and then you also you viewed the camera footage, and then spoke to another person, and also viewed a body. So there were 4 major points that you touched on, besides having a lengthy discussion with Beatrix Fairweather herself.
And so just from a really quick, interesting point that I just thought of, but I remember thinking at the time, I'm like, because I'm playing a werewolf, I'm going into and I know everybody. Aaron knows everybody that has Auspex out the keister, but I'm thinking, well, I could try and sneak in, so I'm trying to think of all these ways where I could hide in the back or I could do whatever, and instead I just you know what, screw it, I'm just going to own it and have her just utter confidence although it's completely her acting, because she's not a confident person. Based on her backstory, but having her just own it and become this different, almost her role playing a different character as she's going, I thought was just kind of a fun shift. But it was literally something I was thinking about, well, maybe I'm going to compromise the mission by going in here. Maybe I should just wait this one out, but instead decide to embrace it and go the other direction. So it's kind of a fun little change.
Yeah, so there was a lot of information gathering at that session. So I would say that probably the focus is, were there any highlights for anyone, or what was the takeaway that moved to the next stage of things? What did you come away thinking from that session, or from those? There were actually a pair of sessions at the facility, and so what did you come away thinking? And also, what were there any highlights? Because I can think of 1 or 2 in particular that caught me.
Yeah. Yep.
I think the only thing I really quote unquote noticed was the magistrate gal really took a liking. I don't remember if it was to Vincent or maybe it was Ringil. I don't, but she really liked one of them, and she was kind of, I wouldn't say flirty, but at least she was
magistrate, the lady that was leading us around.
Yeah, the one that we met, the one who noticed what Riley was. And I didn't pick up, I saw the look, and I remember the look that she gave Riley, but I didn't pick up on, I guess Vincent's whole situation was, well, he trusts Ringil. Ringil wouldn't bring someone in with him that shouldn't. but later on in the story, we find out that Ringo likes to talk to a lot of people, and now Vincent's like, motherfucker, you talked to one more. Of course, that's all player knowledge. I can't use that, but still, he brought in someone, and Vince. Anybody who knows Vincent's, the Coteries, his family. He trusts them wholeheartedly to maybe not make every right decision, but at least have the Coteries back. So when he brought in Riley, he thought she is solid. She's one of us.
You look trustworthy.
Exactly. You look trustworthy. Join
us.
How a man like that could ever survive in an organized crime family is beyond me. I guess that's probably why he didn't survive in an organized crime family.
Technically, he didn't survive.
So actually, you are correct that Beatrix Fairweather did take a liking to somebody, but it was neither of those two. That was a Raven moment, actually. That is one of my highlights too. Honestly, if Raven wanted to mention, if she remembers why Beatrix Fairweather was so chummy.
I think I know we definitely bonded on the art history because my character, I think I rolled pretty good for my skill roll there, but my character has, of course, in her academics, she has the specialty of art history, and she made remarks that showed that she was knowledgeable.
Yeah, but you know what's particularly funny to me is I completely overlooked this in your backstory and didn't think anything of it, and when I chose the Dump Martin Oaks facility as the location for this research facility, this occult arcane research facility, I didn't realize what Jessica specialized in with her art history in particular.
Well, I can't remember which one it was specifically. I know she has the Asian, the Renaissance, the Baroque, that type. But I can't.
Byzantine Empire in particular.
Yes, Byzantine, yes.
Yep. And when you mentioned that, I was like, wait a minute, what? I forgot that you specialize in that. That's what the Dumbarton Oaks facility actually is well known for, I mean, in the real world. And so I was like, well, of course. I mean, if you're going to start talking art history, yeah. I mean, she does occult stuff, but she works at a museum. I mean, it's going to be a blending of the two. So you rolled really well on that art history. And so you and Fairweather actually you still have a connection in that department coming away from that whole mission.
Yes, I was thinking of actually spending points at some point to do her as a contact because that was definitely a good connection there because they have mutual respect because they're both knowledgeable in this field and interested in this field.
Which is good, too, because the Smithsonian is actually controlled by the Tremere primarily and is a cooperative effort. So you would have to work hand in hand with those folks occasionally in that department. So it's good to be kind of chummy with the nerds, I guess, is the way I would put it.
Jessica is an art nerd. It's fine.
That was excellent venture role playing. That whole session, it was really good.
Oh god, it was so stuffy. It was perfect. You also met. So she was actually not a magistrate. She was a high level apprentice. The magistrate there, the one who was actually in charge, was a man named Vernon Haskin, who is he is the magistrate. In charge of the facility, but specializes in the creation of wards and was the one you talked to about. He was kind of a pompous blowhard who didn't really know what he was talking about most of the time. And he had a somewhat older than usual werewolf body that he claimed was from the attack, or he believed was from the attack at least.
Yeah, so there was a lot of like
2 days old when it was easily a week or more.
Yeah, that was where one of the times when Riley kind of interjected so secretly and only kind of was confidence within, or only had that confidence with the coterie, but she had snuck some fur and was able to determine the age of it. So she basically hid that object from them and then was able to determine that it was indeed from, an older, from an older sample, something that wasn't killed. And then the way in which it was killed was different too. It wasn't like it wasn't shot up or anything. I think it was clawed itself. So there's a couple like holes there.
Seriously, I think.
Yeah, and we looked at like the cameras too, and the cameras seemed like, with Riley knowing how werewolves operate intimately, nothing like added up. Like it wasn't, like the cameras, the eyewitness testimony, how they moved, the fact that there was anything even still remotely alive, and that they were able to beat back a werewolf incursion with like 4 werewolves and like six ghouls or something like that. Like it just nothing. Yeah, it was. I don't know if it was like that little, but it's definitely. It was like there'd be a lot more damage if they were doing a concerted attack, and like they, it just didn't make much sense to Riley that this would have been the way the Tremere were saying it happened, and a big part of it was like. Trying to find what was his name? I don't have these notes in front of me, but the guy that we were supposed to be looking for ended up going out the back at the same time with like a masqueraded woman, and for whatever reason just sort of walked out the front door while the werewolf attack was happening in the rear. And ultimately, this guy, this Asian fellow, Chu or something, I can't remember. What was his name?
Trevor Chu.
Trevor Chu.
He was in possession of. He was actually, object. As you found from the footage, he was in possession of the thing that was quote unquote stolen, and waltzed right out the door with it in the arms of with this masked woman. Who just walked right by the guard on the completely opposite side of the building at the same time the attack was happening. And shortly before power was lost in the building.
Yeah, and it would turn out that Trevor Chu was actually a compelled guardian of this item, almost as a punishment. It seemed like, and so he would have to watch over and protect whatever this item was. It was of great interest to apparently both the Tremere and the prince specifically. So, why we were there, basically, to find out what the hell happened. So our investigation wasn't really into the werewolves, per se. It was into finding this object, and the werewolves seemed to almost be like a distraction for that part to happen, which was actually the more important part for the coterie, and sort of an equal important part for Riley on a personal level because of her obvious connection.
I think wasn't it also Riley who figured out that it wasn't as many? They said it was a pack of werewolves, but Riley figured out it was like maybe 1 or 2 actual werewolves. But then there was other. She didn't know. I don't think wolves. She knew what the other was. Right,
yeah,
just regular wolves.
You were actually 3. So Ringil and Riley both went on that little expedition out when you guys were out checking the yard. What you found was that there were only really 3 sets of distinct tracks, but the camera footage showed clearly 6 forms or more coming over the wall. Some in wolf form, some in full on war form. Full on hybrid form coming over the wall. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and so that was it. Go ahead, Cedar.
The ones that were in full-on wolf form, we determined were actually just gangrel that had turned to wolves. So they were vampires because we smelled, I believe, or she smelled, Riley did, the scent of death or dead things, if I remember what she specifically mentioned. So I guess what kind of threw us off or made us question things was that the Crinos form werewolves is something that really only an elder would be able to actually achieve, as far as like the horde form to look like one. So it's like they had ghouled werewolves somehow or something, or mind controlled, or they were already dead.
Yeah. Well, and
there were no tracks for the ones that came over. For the ones that were in Crinos form, there were no tracks evident. Yeah. There were enough tracks to kind of
like an illusion
for a layman. Yeah, a layman would have seen.
Oh, right, that's right. Yes.
Yeah. But the wolves would have been gangrel with 4 dots in Protean that took wolf form basically. And the interesting side note, and I just want to say that this was another kind of fun this was another potential giveaway that just sort of played out because nobody like pushed it. But looking at rules as written, when you're a vampire doing the change to the wolf like Ringild does, your clothes shift with you. When you're a werewolf, unless if clothes are dedicated, your clothes do not. So Riley had non-dedicated stuff, so that's why she went into the woods, took off her clothes, and then shifted straight into wolf, in the bushes, so that nobody would see her.
I did not think about that, and I mean, I heard it, and the gears were turning, but I was like, meh.
Yeah,
maybe
she just has a thing. She doesn't understand, and like she never understood like the clans or anything like that. She was just kind of like, yeah, I guess I'm a gangrel, kind of thing. But yeah, that was one, and that happened, and everybody, it was all, and if everybody had been like, wait, why? They could have like looked at her and seen her shifting through, Galabro, Krinos, Hispo down to wolf form. But she went into the bushes and everybody gave her privacy, and she came out and then went back to the bushes to shift back and then put on her clothes again. Whereas Ringild didn't have to do any of that.
So there were also two other important things that happened before you left the facility, and the first was that she got a little klepto, and happened to steal a completely just out of the ordinary. Didn't know what she was doing. Just grabbed a key off the desk of the security chief at the facility.
It seemed important.
Yeah.
And yeah, she's very curious, and she's a ragabash. So I figured, she'd still have those inklings, and she has something called Taking the Forgotten, which allows her to take something, and basically when she takes it, she has whoever the owner was forget that they had it. So she activated that to, I believe, some success. And so she was able to basically abscond with whatever this key was. The
security chief had no knowledge that she had taken the key because he didn't remember ever having it.
Right.
However, that came in later. So the other thing is that was on the way out from chit-chatting with another little clue that got dropped. And this one was a Vincent moment. Was Vincent hit this person with a pretty hard blast of presence and had her entranced with him for a month, actually. And that was Dahlia, the Toreador, sort of itinerant scholar type,
on sabbatical.
Assisting the Premier. Yeah. And do you remember what the clue was about that one? I'm gonna throw this one to Vincent. Do you remember what happened to her that was kind of weird?
Not honestly, I don't remember. I don't remember exactly, to be totally honest.
So she was there, and I'll throw it to the class. Does anybody else remember kind of the weird thing that happened during that conversation?
Well, she kept looking at my aura. And she was absolutely enamored with my aura.
Well, isn't that where she was also spacing off too, right?
Completely. So go ahead, Cedar.
Right. She stared at all of us, and then when she finally got to Riley, she basically became entranced and was like, "Oh, right," or something, I think. And so that was a pretty big telltale that there was something not quite ordinary about Riley from her. And we had to kind of wave her hands in front of her face to get her to snap out of it.
Yeah,
actually, Riley had to leave the room. Riley ended up having to leave the room, which is why she went off and stole a key, because she was wandering around unsupervised, essentially. Yeah. And that's exactly what it was. Is Dahlia was there. Her expertise in auspex. She had the full 5 dots and then some. She was capable of astral projecting. And one of the things that they were there studying was that the Dumbarton Oaks site was actually a Tremere facility built around a werewolf cairn to contain it in wards to keep the werewolves away, to try and figure out a way to harness whatever this magical energy was. Of course, rules is written, or just kind of World of Darkness lore is, vampires really can't do anything with the werewolf cairns. They're not, but mages and werewolves are all hot for them. But the Tremere don't really know that. To them, it's a mystery to unlock. They're still trying to see if they can find some use for it. So that's primarily what the facility was there to study and contain. Well, she was brought in because there was some sort of connection to other realms, spirit realms or something. So as the natural projector, she was brought there to attempt to sort of suss that out from that angle, since blood magic was having no effect on the place. But that means she was also really good at reading auras, and that was her particular art form, or her obsession was, finding unique and interesting auras on people. Truly unique people would put her into that Toreador weakness state of entrancement. And so a werewolf aura she had never seen before certainly would. And that was actually a big clue moment about the case itself, too, because when she was hit with presence by Vincent, she was very cooperative and told you everything you wanted to know, which was that basically she didn't see any auras like Riley. She didn't see any bright auras, although she didn't put it in those terms, because she didn't discuss it as though Riley was a werewolf. She didn't give it away, but she just saw ordinary angry auras out in the yard while she was astral projecting and stuff during the fight. Nothing, and there were only 3. And you guys asked a couple times, weren't there 6 or 7? Nope, there were 3. And then, of course, the Tremere besides, and so that was another big clue that something was up with the attack. That it wasn't actually all that it was chalked up to be, despite what the camera showed.
Right.
But it also meant that you knew that the Tremere themselves weren't necessarily lying, and it wasn't necessarily like obfuscation or anything like that, because the cameras definitely saw something. There were 7 total werewolves on camera, including the 3 in wolf form. But no evidence in aura form or in the auras. No evidence in no physical presence, and the amount of damage that was done wasn't significant enough.
And the body wasn't from the right time frame or from the right description of how it would have died by firearm. It was killed by tooth and claw. So yeah.
So from there. Yeah, and at that point, from there, you did end up going off on a sidetrack, because Vincent was convinced. It was funny because Rusty kept texting me on the side in character as Vincent texting Ward, like, hey, trying to get the inside scoop. And of course, I definitely was prepared for that. And so Ward was as elusive as possible, like the rooster caws at midnight kind of nonsense. Like, I must have texted back to Rusty. I can't remember. I'd have to go look at the chat, but it was like he kept texting Vincent very literal statements like, I don't know anything about this specific thing, or, basically saying that he couldn't talk over the phone or he couldn't talk electronically because he couldn't be sure that it was secure enough that somebody wouldn't access it eventually. But it took a little while to get Vincent to glom on, and Rusty, the player, to glom onto what he was saying. It was like, no, he's literally saying, if you read the words, he's not going to talk about it here, but, talk in person only, which they did eventually.
Which we did. And that was another time where they almost found out about Riley, but then you rolled crappy.
Or himself, actually. That was the one, because
we met Rusty at the rooftop.
Vincent pushed that meeting, so Ward met with him and used his new acquired powers of Auspex. He had been digging on that, because I don't know if anybody remembers, but Ward used to have 1 perception and miss everything. Yeah. No alertness, 1 perception, and he was surprised by everything that happened constantly. Like, totally stuck in his own little world, obsessed with his own little, occult stuff, and not paying attention to what was going on around him. So since then, as part of the investigation to track down the gem, he really he picked up some perception. He mastered Auspex. So he was testing out his ability to read auras and read this new person, and unfortunately did not have the skills at the time to succeed at the role. So was not able to give away the surprise there, because he absolutely would have spoken up about that and been like, hey guys, so why are you hanging out with a werewolf? Make a new friend since I've been gone? It's been a week. What the hell?
You replaced me with a werewolf?
This is bullshit.
That smells like a Ringo situation. So after that meeting, which was fairly uneventful other than him, that was where Ward did confirm that he was familiar with Trevor Chew, that Trevor was a former anti-tribute of the Tremere, who was sort of brought back into the fold, who came and kind of turned himself in, because the Tremere are notorious for tracking down and killing their anti-tribute, magically so, being able to, because of the mark that appears on them when they join the Sabbat. So Trevor came back to the fold, but was subjected to a task where he was entrusted to guard this thing. Of course, Ward didn't know what that thing was, but whatever it was, it's basically if he fails in his task, his life is forfeit. So he knows that Trevor, despite what you saw on the camera, Trevor wouldn't just walk out with it and hand it over because, the Tremere should be able to track him down magically and kill his ass and take it back, which is also weird because the Tremere themselves should have found him almost instantly then, if that's the case. So that was another kind of an odd thing, is that they were unable to track him down, and neither was Riley using one of her abilities.
Yep. So she was an expert tracker, even for werewolf standards, and a number of gifts associated with tracking. And even she was unable to locate him. Although when she stepped sideways, she was able to find, she felt his presence, but she couldn't.
That was later on, though.
Him. That was later on.
Yeah. Yeah, so in the material world, the use of her ability to know the location of a person, or the general direction of a person, rather, to be able to essentially follow them at any distance, as long as she knew their name, seemed to not function. She could feel that he was out there, he existed. It wasn't, it wasn't nothing, but it was like a radar disruption kind of thing. It wasn't nothing, but it wasn't something. It wasn't enough to follow.
Yeah.
And from there, you guys were ambushed by a group, and silly me picking a name. I don't know. This is one of the things that I remember is I pulled a name out of my ass randomly off my phone one day for one of these characters, and of course, I could pick something crazy and literary, and it might fly over people's heads or whatever. But I pick the showrunner for Sons of Anarchy, and Rusty gets it instantly. So Vince Coulter, you called me out on that one. I'm just like, I didn't mean to use that name. I just happened to have something on Facebook came up or whatever, and I was just like, oh, that's a good name. I like that name. And that's not one that. It's not like I named him Gandalf. Nobody's gonna be like, oh yeah, you're just using a cheesy name. Yeah, but no, of course, one of my players immediately is like, oh yeah, that's funny, and I was like, well, that wasn't an inside joke, but I guess it is now. So you guys were ambushed by kind of an independent group in the streets, actually, that night, by the Black Irons, which was a biker gang headed up by some Sabbat, but some out-of-towners. Actually, not even really Sabbat, really kind of a more independent group, and some out-of-towners from down south that Rusty or Vincent exploded. The one it was a group of ghouls and a vampire, and led by one vampire who Rusty exploded with one ridiculous hit. I think he was testing out his claws.
Yeah,
sounds about right.
Yeah. He ended up knowing that they were going into the combat. He didn't know which one was. He knew the one was definitely a vampire, and he wanted to end him fast. So yeah, he grew the claws and basically shredded him one hit, one kind of thing.
Yep, and you guys had a firefight in the streets, which Tabitha Hill almost had a small aneurysm over as you guys were driving a shot-up car down the street, and she called you up and was like, "Is this you that I'm getting reports of? Because our dog told me about you guys. I'm guessing this is you. I'm hearing about a possible shooting, and also that there was a vehicle driving north on this such and such, and shot all to hell. Yep, that's you guys." And that was like the third or fourth car we've had shot up at that point. So that started to be our thing.
I think that's what also prompted Heinrich to get the Scooby van, wasn't it?
No, Heinrich getting the Scooby van was actually a month-long project, if you remember. He asked Aaron for that way early on, and it took him like a month to get this custom job. Probably the airbrushing, the art was probably the longest part, I'm guessing. Yeah, we got one off the line ready for you with the surveillance equipment. No, but the art.
You want what on the side?
The shot up car was the motivation for Jessica to go, screw it, I'm getting an armored vehicle for us.
Oh yeah,
that was the second shot up car though. We still had another shot up car. The Scooby van got shot up, which is the final straw that led to the armored car, but this was one of many shot up vehicles that led to the armored one. I think getting
world.
shot at dangerous to drive around in an unarmored vehicle for us at least. So one of the things that you guys found on that group of people was a bag, a duffel bag full of stuff that they had secured, that had some surveillance footage or some home video footage. Looked like they had taken a home DVR setup for a set of home cameras from a house just across the street from Dumbarton Oaks. That showed the woman escorting Trevor Chew out of the building, and it showed her driver as well. So your next stop was kind of to hit up that house, but then also meet up with the park ranger, because there is a national park bordering the exterior of the facility, just on the outside of the stone wall that borders the facility. And so that was kind of a two-parter there. And it was at the house that you found a gift card for a certain restaurant.
That's right.
Footage of a driver and a gift card.
Yeah. And that's also, we showed up there, and the restaurant was ran by vampires, and the rest of the shit in there was all illusions, right?
We also
restaurant,
had I think it wasn't at the toilet basin. Riley, I think, found a Ziploc bag with like a burner phone or whatever too. Was that right, or am I jumping ahead?
Oh no. Out of order a little bit for both of those. So the big thing that threw me off as the storyteller here was you guys it was a classic case of almost going for like, not the boss per se, but like a
just
major
skipping
player.
It all.
Oh my God, which would have been fine in a sense, like I was prepared to deal with it, but I was not prepared to figure out how not to like kill your asses if you did. Because if you remember correctly, what you did is you did go to this house, and it was a residence that had some security cameras set up outside that happened to be at a good angle to pick up the front of the facility, the driveway, and also the trail that leads along the back of the facility. And what they saw was obviously someone casing the joint, or this cleanup crew, these black irons, they were sent to kind of clean things up a little bit, or investigate themselves on behalf of the gangrel. Which is kind of what you found out, is that they were operating under the guidance of the actual gangrel in DC, who couldn't get involved themselves, so they brought in some outside help who wouldn't be affiliated. But they had a stake in this too, kind of backing up the idea that the gangrel coming over the wall as werewolves, there was some kind of vampire thing going on, not a werewolf thing at all. But what you saw was this driver. You found that where the driver had been, you saw him drop something. You found this Shoney's gift card. And then when you went and talked to the park ranger, Crystal Lopez, she mentioned that this Patrick O'Neill guy, he was actually a newer guy, a newer kindred, who had been turned not too long ago, who had kind of gone missing around the same time. And the game cameras that they keep in the park suspiciously were having their batteries changed out at that particular time. So there wasn't a lot of external footage of the lupines moving through the woods and how they got past anybody. Yeah. Kind of suspicious, and the fact that he's gone missing. So the very first thing that my players do is, oh, hi, I'm Riley. I have the magical ability to track anybody in the world if I just know who they are. Okay, well, Trevor Chew might have a reason for being hidden from that, because, well, he already knows the Tremere are going to track him, so surely if he's hiding or something, he can block that too. Well, Trevor Chew can't be found, but you know who can be? Patrick O'Neill.
Yeah.
So you guys drive up north about an hour outside of the city to Beach Mills Road, a rather ritzy part of town, to this very nice-looking $5 million house on the river, where you pull outside and you definitely see a couple of guards that look like they might be vampires. They give you the look, and you guys have the worst roll on the drive-by subtly attempt that you pulled. You're like, oh yeah, we're gonna drive by inconspicuously and we're just gonna kind of cruise by and scope it out. No, they absolutely eyeballed it. Like, you knew you had been made, and they were carrying some heavy duty weapons and looking at you going like,
Weren't we driving the Scooby van then, though? That's why I think it gave us away, wasn't it?
We're just doing donuts on their lawn.
I'm pretty sure that's what it was. I think we were driving.
This is normal.
Yes, I believe it was, yes.
That's why we got spotted. So, yeah, nice paint job, fucker. God damn.
Not vampire-y at all.
It's but it is very
That's the
Heinrich.
perfect
It's
cover.
classic Heinrich right there. Yeah. Heinrich being about 30 years out of date for what he thinks is inconspicuous.
Yeah, would have gone well at like an Iron Maiden concert or something.
Yeah, if he's the FBI spying on Woodstock or something, like maybe a little more than 30 years out of date, but yeah, so you guys roll up on this house, and you can definitely tell, like, Riley's feeling the little pulse, and he is in there. This Patrick O'Neill is in there. But this house is owned by a holding company of a holding company of a holding company that also happens to own the vehicle, the driver service of the car whose license plate was seen on the footage, the driver that dropped the Shoney. So it's all starting to get kind of like, well, who the fuck is this person now? Mm-hmm. So you do end up going to O'Neill's residence. You do end up getting his personnel file from the Rangers, the park rangers, because of course you're connected to DCPD. No reason you couldn't ask for that. So you go and you ask for it. So you go to his house, and yes, you did find in a concealed couple of spots. You found some items, including an extra firearm that was clearly filed off serial numbers and stuff. So a roll of money, a good $5,000 in rolled up bills, and a cell phone as well, which. Oh, as well as a birthday invitation too from Shoney's, for a free ice cream sundae, saying happy birthday or whatever to Patrick O'Neill. But it was clearly not his birthday. If you guys actually, I can't remember. I don't have the date. Oh, it was 2/29/1997, and clearly Patrick O'Neill was significantly older than that. Because that would have made him like 24, and he was easily in his 30s when he was turned in the first place. So I did throw that out there, but also little tidbit: if anybody had Googled 29, the 29th of February, 1997 wasn't a leap year either. It was clearly a fabricated birthday, but that was a little niche. I didn't expect anybody to actually Google it, but I don't know. Maybe Aaron's sitting there going, "Look, I wonder if that's a leap year. That's a weird."
Sounds
birthday.
like something I'd look up.
It does. That's I put it there for you, really. So
appreciate the detail.
In the end, you do end up calling. There is a number on there, and you do end up calling it. And actually, Heinrich figured out the sequence of phone digits. It's an answering service. It's basically a bank. It's like you called AT&T. But after going through the stupid prompts, and the thing is none of the prompts were any of the options. It was press 1 to do this, 2 to do this, 3 to do this, and you would press like 5. Okay, well, that wasn't one of the options. It didn't take you to an operator, though. It took you to another menu, and it continued to seem like it was like, okay, well, if you want new accounts, do this. And actually, Ben, as Heinrich figured out the series of digits that was supposed to be the code, and you ended up talking to a person on the other end of the phone, a live human being, all of a sudden, basically saying, who is this, and where did, you're not Patrick.
Yeah, as I recall, we were like, yes, we are.
Sure. You guys actually hung up. You hung up on me. I'm like, you're not Patrick, and you're just like, click.
I was like, cool, we solved the code. Great. Oh, what do I say now? Okay.
Well, because you're like, well, you don't know that. And I'm like, no, because Patrick's here with me.
And then she called, right?
She called the phone back, and you guys decided to answer.
And I think I answered it.
Hilarious. The fact that you hung up in a panic was hilarious to me.
That was such a prank call thing to do. That's a prank call news. You got to roll with
like
it.
A 6-year-old calling 911 being like, oh, God, they weren't supposed to answer. And then they call you back and like, this is 911. Is everybody okay there?
Is everybody okay? You're like, yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there's tons of kids who have figured out that they'll call you back if you do that and hang up on them. And that's exactly what it made me think of, is like a group of kids who were prank calling people and then like someone star 69'd them. So you actually end up getting a formal invitation to the Shoney's at that point to come and see them. But when you show up there, you guys played it really cautious. So that is where you went to the Shoney's where stuff was weird, Rusty. And I don't know what you guys remember of that one. I'll let you kind of take it and see what you recall.
Well, there was there was people not eating food. I remember that.
Well, that didn't come until later. So we started with Riley basically offering herself to go through the back door to see what she can find first. So,
yeah, you guys did do a Mission Impossible, didn't you? I forgot about that.
Yeah, the players all kind of waited in the car, and then I just did a quick little, stealth mission where I went through the back, and I have a open seal. So I was able to open it with enough successes and based on the gauntlet, and this was like Central Virginia or something like so. So the Shoney's is not very close.
It's actually about 2 hours south along the coast in kind of a pass through town sort of place. It's like the equivalent of stopping at a Denny's as a truck driver kind of place.
Yeah, well outside of the Prince's domain, right? And so, anyway, but that was neither here nor there for Riley. She doesn't even know all that stuff. But she, she'd been very cautious before. She didn't shift into wolf form or shift into, even in the combat. She stayed in kind of human form, helmet form. And so in this case, she wanted to kind of do this, but she didn't want to be blatant about it. And she wanted to make sure, she knew she was adept at moving fast and hiding. And she can get into pretty good, secure facilities. So she went in, and the food was off. It was like they had a locked. They had 2 freezers, 2 reefers, one of which she got access to, which was food. Although it didn't look like it was actively serviced, and all of the cooking and the kitchen area was basically shiny and new, but so not used. And then she kind of went around, didn't see a lot of it didn't look like they were actually using it for food. So she wasn't quite sure what was going on at the time. So she went back to the coterie and basically relayed what she found. And that's when all of us decided to go up and be like, all right, well, the lights are on. It's not says closed. Looks like there's people inside. Mm-hmm. So we all went in and yeah.
There were a couple of people. There was a couple and their young child. There was a group of younger women there, kind of excitedly chatting it up and stuff. And then there was some of the staff. There was the one greeter or the one hostess, and then of course the sort of the busboy looking guy and the manager who you met later. But when you first came in, it was just those two as the staff, and you were greeted by Allie, who seated you, very nonchalant, no big deal, on his normal day at Shoney's, and seated you kind of away from the others, not too far though to be kind of weird, but just kind of giving you some space since the restaurant was pretty slow, and it was early evening for you guys, late evening for a Shoney's that shuts down at 11. I want to say it was like 10 o'clock or so. So it was getting close to closing. And the thing that you did notice about the freezer or fridge area was that you probably aren't recalling is that one of the fridges or one of the walk-ins was secured magically. When you tested your ability against it, you found, which you can break, but it's more difficult, and you didn't really have the wherewithal at the time to do so.
I didn't want to do the time. Yeah, I want to get back to the coterie so we can.
No, actually, I take that back. You did actually break it, but then when you went in, it was more or less that was the sort of the fake one,
Yeah.
And you didn't see anything untowards other than it really didn't seem like it was used for. The other one was real, but the kitchen seemed to have been shut down. The kitchen had been used. It was a working kitchen, but it seemed to have been shut down hours ago, post dinner rush kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and then I think it was Riley. It was looking and it's are these things on loop or something? Because I didn't get any smells from people, and I was looking around, and I think it was the kids or whatever that had a something that was or they weren't actually eating. That was it. I was looking at the food and they would eat, but nothing would disappear from the plate.
I wrote up, I just want a little peek behind the curtain. I wrote up a half dozen major clues and maybe another half dozen minor clues to see how long it would take everybody to figure out that most of what was going on wasn't real. Mm-hmm. And the one that you ended up globbing onto was the fact that the amount of food never seemed to change. It seemed like they were eating, but the family, none of the food was going away. The one that I thought was the funniest is the people you chose to observe was the family.
Yeah.
And they were trying to feed they had a fussy baby, and they were trying to feed it food or whatever. And the one thing I put out there for the parents in the group, or just anybody who's ever taken a life skills class, was, or knows anything about human children and isn't an alien, was they were trying to feed their baby. And this was like a newborn, not a newborn, but like you probably wouldn't even take them to a restaurant and sit them in a high chair baby. But they were trying to feed a toothless little baby sausage.
Yeah.
And so it was like, wait a minute, you're going to feed that, right. Like, the kid's not even one. Like, how are you feeding them sausage? Because clearly the vampire that created this illusion has never was turned before he had kids. That's all I'm saying.
And well, Jessica was definitely the wrong one for that. She's like, okay.
Yeah, exactly. So I appreciated that of all the things you were staring right at the family and the girls, the thing that you would have noticed about the girls, for example, was that the conversation was more or less on loop, that if you had listened into what they were saying, you would have heard the same phrase several times over the course of, 10 minutes or so. It was enough to fool most people, but the little other tiny peek behind the curtain, since you guys do have membership there now, which is another facet of it, is that operation serves to greet essentially as the doorway for it's one access point, and it's the doorway for folks who aren't driving in to the underground area. And Allie sends away normies who show up with her Ventru abilities of dominate. She has a pretty easy time just saying, leave. Classic leave. And so that's why she's the door greeter. The busboy is actually Erasmo, who you would meet later. His sort of bumbling cousin of sorts. He's in the family. He's a good kid kind of thing, but clearly not as skilled at illusion. And he is a young Ravnos. Young in vampire terms, at least, and clearly still trying to get the finer details, and got a bit of a lecture from Allie about the details.
That's because Riley was like, "Okay, this is all an illusion. Time's up. What the hell? Come out and talk to us. We're on an official investigation." Something like that for the prince. I think we were like, Riley was pretty blunt about it.
Well, the funny thing is you were very blunt, and you ended up talking to the quote unquote the manager, who came over and addressed you like you were customers, because you did just bluntly say like, none of this is real, like, come out for real or whatever. Like, okay. But you didn't openly start shouting like, I'm a vampire,
Right.
So Rudy, the manager, comes out, and he is slightly taller than Vincent. He's a big fella. And Vincent's already ridiculous. And what you don't know, what you didn't see, is that Rudy's actually a gargoyle underneath that obfuscate.
Oh.
That is one reason he is so hulking, and he is the muscle for anybody who can't be turned away by Allie or fooled by Erasmo's young protege and his shoddy illusions. Rudy is there. And Rudy almost went toe-to-toe with you guys, and at that level, at that stage of the game, it would have been a rough go. You'd have probably ended up crying uncle pretty quick. But he did get a call on the radio, and he asked to see your gift card or your invitation, which was coincidentally, had you walked in the door and presented your invitation, your birthday invitation for your free Sunday, you would have been escorted down to the club immediately, because that was what was going to get Patrick O'Neill in the doors. He shows up, and that's sort of the code, is this erroneous birthday invitation with a fake birth date on it.
Yeah, but we got to do everything difficult, though.
You Mission Impossible in the back door, despite the front door being completely unlocked. You sat there and refused to order any food, and then looked around and broke the illusion. And then you almost had a fight with the waitstaff. And then finally sort of got talked down and invited in to be like, okay. So you go down to the club, you have a chit-chat with Erasmo, who turns out to be this wheeling and dealing Ravnos fellow who apparently had a deal with the Tremere to secure the package, or to provide some sort of service. But his information isn't free. So there were a couple of deals made that night, and I know there's a couple that were forgotten. My favorite is Heinrich's, but I'm wondering if anybody remembers the deals, the various deals for information and or other things.
Well, mine I think was like 3 human lives or something like that.
Whoa. There's no inflation when it comes to human lives. It is 1 human life, okay? You get the value of 1 human life.
There was another deal. I think we did this twice.
You went on. You were so enamored with the concept of wheeling and dealing in a currency of the value of a human life that you later on made a deal with someone else, and I'm trying to remember who. And that wasn't even me at that point.
3 wise men. We'll get there.
Yeah. Like Ben's going around as Heinrich now, like using human lives as the currency because he loved that apparently. So
that cost an adolescent child.
Yeah, it was like doing. How does that convert to Canadian dollars? You know, like so.
Yeah, Canadian lives aren't worth it.
So the first thing he does is he says, "Okay, look."
Rebel.
Yeah, exactly. They're at a discount. They're 75%. You know, the going rate of the U.S. human life apparently.
It's like the loon to the dollar.
Right.
Well, yeah, what happened was I was like, okay, I'll offer him money. That's a good start. So I offered him money in Erasmus. I was like, oh, no. We don't deal in such trivia.
Nothing's
We don't do that here.
And I was like, okay.
Well, and the thing is yours wasn't even a deal. So the first thing that happened is he did say, okay, I was hired to do a job, but I'm not just handing out information for free. And this job has cost me more than it was supposed to. And while I was paid already for the first part of it, I'm not just handing things over for free here, so you got to do me a solid. I need you to come win a fight for me. Yep. So he takes, and of course he
was looking at Riley primarily, if I recall correctly.
Originally, yeah. So the one thing I'll say is, as the setting goes, is he takes you down under the Shoney's underground, and there's a nightclub essentially for of some sorts called Afterlife. Very cliche, very on the nose, but he is a very
cliche ravenous.
He's a very flamboyantly, like he very much owns, like he doesn't try to pretend not to be sort of a used car salesman because he assumes that you're going to pick up on that and both not trust him and also think he's a little incompetent because he is so schlocky. But yeah, you see, enter this nightclub, and it has everything. It's got the front of the nightclub. It's dancing, it's drinking, it's humans all over the place. But then there's the back of the nightclub that he takes you to, and the doors are actually silver and bronze and gold handles to sort of indicate levels of sort of secrecy or masquerade. And so the humans are only in that front part of what is a normal sort of underground secret nightclub, and they're just guests of the vampires essentially. They're they're snacks.
And they have rings around their wrist, right?
They do. That was the first time you guys saw the little charm bracelets. That when a human guest was brought in, they had a little charm bracelet for to indicate with little charms on them that were easy to snap off. So it was easy to tell if anybody had taken a drink from this human, so that nobody, because one of the rules of the club was no deaths. We don't want to have body disposal here. We don't want to deal with that. We don't want attention. We don't need vampire nightclubs with body disposal issues. So you can sample the wares, but rule number 1, don't steal someone else's party favor without asking. No fights over the goods. If you brought them, they're yours. And number 2, don't kill them. So that's what the bracelet is for, is to identify who's drinkable easily and how many. Essentially, in game terms, how many points of blood they had lost. But yeah, so after you get past there, though, you find the more debaucherous stuff. You see a room where you're pretty sure you might have seen a mage in one of the rooms kind of schmoozing with vampires, and you saw at least one local politician or two, like a senator, you're pretty sure. You saw, and there was a kind of a pit area that had something going on over there. Well, he takes you down to the pit, and he wants Riley to go in and be in this little underground fight club to step in and have a little fight against a vampire. Now, he knows exactly what Riley is at that point. And why does he know that? Anybody remember what was going on the entire time that you were there talking to Erasmo? Or what you thought was going on?
We thought he was in our head.
He absolutely was sitting there reading your minds. That is number one thing that happens at that club is, he provides a good time. And while everybody's there having a good time, he's picking their brains for secrets, because that's what he really sells, right? That's what he tried to sell you guys, is secrets. He trades, he buys and sells in secrets and favors, and he gets them right out of your head for free, if he can. And the first thing he picked up from Riley was, don't let anybody know I'm a werewolf, essentially. Or I like to think that she's walking through public going, pretend to be a good vampire. Pretend to be a very good vampire. Yes. You know, like, am I acting like vampire enough right now?
Is it Gangrom or is it Gangrel? Maybe Gangrel?
Hey, that's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I need to be at least 80% more vampire.
All right, try to act tough.
So he knew what she was, and he wanted her to fight for him on his behalf in this pit fight, and she was not into it.
No.
So Vincent got all protective and was like, "Oh, you don't have to do that,that," and so he stepped in. Yep. And again,
so Riley's like, "Okay,
smeared the guy.
Nope. I'm good."
Yeah,
because I thought it was going to be me, and originally I was like, well, this is where they find out. This is where I get in trouble, and as soon as I notice the fight's going south, Riley would still shift Krenos and use rage.
Oh my god!
But
Vincent again, you guys skirted it somehow because I kept putting up situations where it would create a conflicting situation where it might reveal that she was a werewolf.
Yeah.
And this was another one. This was really pressuring it. I was like, I'm going to force her to get into a fight or turn it down awkwardly. How is she going to get out of it? And if she turns it down, well, how are you going to get this information?
I mean, this had been 6 sessions in or something, 7 sessions of pretending.
This is a good 4, 5, or 6 in now.
And at this point, Vincent considers Riley family, his coterie.
Yeah, she's part of the group.
And he, as far as Vincent's concerned, is anything physical? No, that's his territory. That's what he does. And so when he stepped up, I think you even revealed at the end of the fight you weren't expecting Vincent to try his new vicissitude ability.
That was his ability to deal with the pit fight significantly faster. Riley would not have had as easy of a time without shifting. That was the point, was that if she did say yes, chances are she was going to start losing the fight if she didn't change. So it was an opportunity for Aaron to try and tap dance out of it somehow, or, you know, how is she going to figure out a polite way to say, nah, no thanks, but still get the information? Well, the answer of Vincent just smears the guy against the wall was not...
explodes his chest.
Yes. That was not the one that I had come up with as the probable thing. It was great. I expected you to get out of it.
Right.
But, it was going to either go one of two ways.
And it was a Russian dude,
reveal
right?
she was a werewolf for now. It was, and that's important. Because it was a mouthy little Russian dude who was being a real Chad about everything, and Erasmo was just giddy that you just smeared him. He was super happy.
Didn't like his sire, right?
Oh my God! Yeah, no, there was a business deal gone down. He mentioned that this guy had insulted him by coming into his territory or whatever, taking in his hospitality or whatever. But this guy had actually they had done some damage to his operation elsewhere, and so this was more than just a friendly fight. It was hey, I really messed this guy up, please. And so you ended up just actually killing him.
I did.
Which was great.
Yeah, knowing what was at stake, and then when Erasmo said, I'll give you the information if you win, I was like, all right, well, I'm going to win. Well, he was like not holding back either. So I thought, okay, well, it's to the death now. So when he tried to crawl away, Vincent was like, nah, he's not having it, and reached in through the back of his chest. I mean, through his back and into his chest and ripped out his heart. And that's when everybody was like, what the fuck? That was hardcore.
Yeah. And Riley's like, whoa. It's like, all right. I mean, I knew this because they were powerful, but have never seen those powers used in that such an abrupt, and it was a pretty quick fight too. It was like 3 or 4 rounds.
Yeah. Well, and that was for Vincent too. Vincent never saw that firsthand until he did it, and at that point he's like,
"Oh shit, I can do that."
Right?
Yeah, and not only did that, if you think about it, especially with that display, at first we group of vampires have walked into this club with a freaking werewolf with us.
Right?
And then Vincent does that. I mean, I must say our reputation probably went pretty good after that.
Yeah.
Don't fuck with those guys.
Yeah.
So not only did you kill this guy, but there were some side bets. So you got your basic information, but there were some side bets. So that is the bet where Erasmo now owes the value. He doesn't owe you one human life, although you could get a human life, I suppose. But it is the value of one human life, whatever that means. That's a pretty ambiguous. You could probably call in some interesting favors from him for that. So that's what he owes Heinrich. He owed Jessica a relic of some sort, which when you went to his office, he handed over a set of 3 coins that he had gotten that happened to be the couple of Byzantine coins, which was kind of a nod back to the Tremere. Obviously, he had gotten those from somewhere legitimate, so that was kind of an odd thing. Further confirmed, sort of, that he was mixed up in all this when he did tell you that, look, he was hired to stage an attack against the Tremere by the prince. That's his patron, right? He was hired to stage this attack in order to secure this thing, this person. But in doing so, they may have flown the coop. He lost him. The reason he lost him was why he was a little bit miffed about the whole thing, is he was not expecting to be attacked by Gangrel en route to deliver the package he secured, which is why the guy got away. And he explained that, like, look, I lost one of my people, my driver, the guy you saw on the camera, the driver was lost. Lost as in, like, I don't know where he's at. And I don't know where Trevor Chew went, because we got attacked by Gangrel, and we weren't told there was a third party in the game. We were told we were just, doing a smoke show about, some werewolves, and then we'd go in and fetch the goods and call it a day. So we did it. A little bit of trading of some information back and forth, and come to find out, or the one thing he says is look, they're gonna track him down, like he's still good for it, but you guys really owe him for it, right? So you're gonna owe him a job, and what you're gonna do is you're gonna run security for him at this party. Mm-hmm. So that's your job. And if you do this for him, so the whole thing about the fight was just to tell you where the package was in the first place. He was a little deceitful about it, because ultimately the answer was, well, where the package is not here. So that's where it is. I mean, I told you where it's at, so, we're good. But look, if you want it, this is what it's going to cost you. And we will track it down. You gotta run security. In the meantime, Riley traded a few things she now has membership to the club in exchange for a service that she is yet to provide. Yep. On credit. But that was a private deal between her and him. She now has a place to crash there.
Yeah, so from her point, she just wants to get away from the abuse and have, like, multiple ways. This one just dropped in her lap and seems to be out of the way. It's not necessarily deep in vampire territory. There's other, supernaturals here. It's sort of more cosmopolitan in the sense that, you can kind of get away with it. He sort of suggested, like, hey, there's a lot of people that would like to, have sex with a werewolf kind of thing. And, for her part, she was really disgusted and immediately turned off by that for many, many reasons. But she was open to the idea of just being a member if she could provide, the finding of an object or a person or, some sort of favor to be owed, non-explicit in nature, although could be violent if needed. And so she kind of jumped at that. And was excited to have that sort of option, beyond Ringill, because she also kind of picked up pretty quick that, being that she's not vampire, she could surmise, if it was her people and the reverse were happening, there would be significant, very significant, fallouts for her. So she could imagine the same thing for Ringill, and she wouldn't want to put him in that position. So she wanted to have kind of her own contact, her own, way to get in that's besides Ringill, in the event that, the Ringill contact, she didn't want to put that in jeopardy.
Yeah, so Vincent did leverage, though, as part of the deal that the coterie also has membership to the club, which does give them access if they need to call on it. They still have to pay for things, but it does give them sort of access to some of the services they provide, which were
Bronze.
some of the same things you can get from, and some of the same stuff you can get from sort of being involved with the prince and being involved with just the general camarilla, but maybe outside the prince's purview. Maybe if you needed some memory wipes, if you needed something covered up or something disappeared, something stolen, or whatever, and didn't want the prince to know, it's good to have another option for someone to hire, and that's a lot of what he provides, or someone to go for information, or even a place to crash, a safe haven outside of, say, the control of a specific group of people. It's neither Sabat nor Camarilla. It's independent.
It's an old mafia thing. It's not what you know. It's who you know.
Exactly. So now you guys have a friend at the vampire speakeasy, so to speak, which happens to be a Shoney's,
right?
So of all things. So you guys left that encounter kind of knowing that you'd get a phone call the next day to make the arrangements to, all you got to do is babysit this party. It's no big deal. He has information that says that there might be an attack of some sort. And he can't really get into it other than, look, you guys are going to show up, put your tuxedos on and play nice. And if something breaks out, you're there as extra muscle. Yeah, we got people there. But something tells me that I got word that there might be an inside job going on, that I can't trust all my people or all of the people there. So you're my security measure, my little extra, the unknown from outside that nobody is going to expect. And you've got a werewolf with you, but he didn't mention that part.
Well, he knew
you guys got ambushed.
He knew that based on talking with me and then reading my mind that I didn't necessarily want to broadcast that. Which is also why I didn't want to do the fight as well, because she just was enjoying pretending she was somebody, a gangrel at that point. And she didn't want to let the cat out of the bag. She wanted to go as long as she could, if not just indefinitely, under that guise, role playing someone completely different than she is. So. Yeah.
You did have a little bit of grudge match with the Russians' goons. Because of course there's no open fighting in the club itself, but he did meet you in the parking lot and sick some of his henchmen on you. The Russian being the brother of the guy that you killed. That was his kind of dumber actual true brother. This one was a true relative. Like, they were actually a pair of brothers that were embraced. A couple of Russian mafia types, and this one was far more business-like. The other one was much more like the wild, kind of party guy kind of thing. The one that Vincent smeared. So the really grumpy, scary-looking one attacked you guys in the parking lot, or he sicked his goons and then left, actually. So you fought a pair of assailants in the parking lot there. That was a pretty tough fight at one point.
It was. And that was where Riley had to shift. I mean, I guess she didn't have to, but she decided to, seeing that some of the coterie mates were starting to struggle and wanting to kind of go in and protect them as her new family, that she would see it. She got more respect and frank, love from this group of undead than she's ever gotten from her own kind, short of her father. So she basically decided, okay, enough is enough. And she shifted into Krenos and basically, laid waste to the last guy. And then was basically looking at, Erasmo and all them as they started coming towards seeing what they were going to do. But they waved us off and agreed to take care of it.
So unfortunately, that rooftop person who was the Lasombra controlling the shadows had a very strong protective ability that she could use, but she did not utilize it. She utilized it one turn too late for how quickly Riley was able to scale the building and get to her. So by the time she utilized it, it was tough, and it definitely made her really resistant to taking the damage from the claws. But she had already gotten like 4 points of damage by that point and was already in like mauled or whatever. Had to jump off the rooftop and like try and bail on them. And that was an interesting moment too, because you guys had two captives who both had some powerful disciplines and some fairly unique applications of them. But Erasmo came out of the club, of course, and proceeded to a little display of illusionary power as well, walled off the scene to kind of prevent onlookers from driving by and seeing.
That was actually also the first introduction of Vincent's nemesis as well.
Yeah, although you didn't tell everybody about that one necessarily.
I did, but I didn't. I did start to go into my frenzy, and I think that was the second time that Vincent got staked, I thought.
No, you didn't frenzy at all. You were busy fighting something that nobody else saw.
Yeah, he got into your mind and created something that you hated.
Yeah, it worked.
I'll give you a hint there though, Rusty. Vincent should talk to Steve because Steve knows a little bit about the discipline that made that happen.
Okay. Oh well. Player knowledge. I'll try to role play that.
Yeah.
So Vincent was busy flailing at shadows, essentially, and nothing. Not even shadows, because at least shadows are dangerous for real in this world. But no, Vincent was busy flailing around at nothing, and everybody else is standing there going, "Hey, Vinny, you're not hitting anything."
Yeah.
And they were left to actually deal with a couple of spiky ghouls. The other guy was the Tizmitzi who was turning. He had a pair of ghouls that he armored up in bony thorns to go toe to toe with everybody.
Somber on the roof.
Yep, little Summer on the Roof. Yes, that's my favorite vampire musical.
That's it.
So yeah. After you cleaned up, you guys, you actually surprised me by standing down. I thought you would be wheeling and you'd be in that mindset of wheeling and dealing, and you'd be, Erasmo came out and he was like, yeah, give him to me, like it'd be a big favor to me or whatever. But you didn't actually ask him for anything. So, I'm surprised that you didn't go for something because you let him take both of those captives as bargaining chips for him in the Russian. Because he still has to deal with the Russian, apparently, according to him, and these will make good bargaining chips.
And the side note to that is first of all, the coterie's not going to forget that. Number one, number two, when we go back there, it's kind of like a hey, remember that time? More of a I don't know, a favor for a favor.
Yeah,
paying it forward, exactly.
Yeah, it's like Riley's like, well, I just did a really good service for you.
Let me ask you, if you didn't get it in writing, does Erasmo seem like the kind of guy to do charity work? Like
I
maybe
say charity work, but I do find the guy that I do feel the guy is at least, yeah, you help me out. I'll throw you this bone. I feel like he's that kind of guy.
Okay.
He did seem fair dealing, and he was very charismatic.
He is fair dealing, but I will caution you. He was very specific with wording on things too, though. Very much like, hey, look, I honor my deals, but you better be careful what deal you make. I'm, not as bad as a genie, but you better be careful what you wish for. Yeah. So anyway, you guys get the call the next day. You get the arrangements. You guys go shopping for party dresses because Riley is not outfitted for this nonsense.
Yeah, and this is where I think Riley was really bonding with Jessica too, and at that point had bonded with everybody in the group, in different, in a different capacity, and really was starting to just like the life of a vampire, really, and just seeing all the coterie members and Jessica just offering to buy her a dress, and I still have the name of it written on my character sheet. And what Jessica had found. Let's see if I actually have it here.
Also take care to note that even after you did change Riley changed into Krenos, the rest of the coterie was like, yeah, okay, let's go. Okay,
I was expecting like this big thing and being like, oh shit, and it kind of was, but it took a while for everybody to be like, wait, what?
I feel like that's still one of many moments, and I'm going to call out Jessica on this one. I feel like that's still one of many moments where she's like, okay, wait a minute, what now? I'm sorry, we need to talk about this stuff before you guys do this. And the next one being much later in more recent times with what happened with Ward. I feel like she keeps getting the bad end of the deal of all the shit that the rest of us keep doing. And like she's just there to deal with the mess that we've created.
Yes, but she also had the philosophy, and the reason why she didn't treat Riley differently after that and was still the same with her is because she's like, okay, this person hasn't changed who they are. I know something more about them now that I didn't know before, but they have not changed as a person.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
And so she already kind of thought of her as a little sister, which is why she was taking her in hand and trying to let's make this ugly duckling into a swan type thing.
Which was another Jessica moment of like, okay, there's only one character in this coterie who's going to be able to go dress shopping, and regardless of gender. Here, only one person with enough class and modern tastes to do so. I feel like Heinrich probably could have afforded the fancy tailor if you wanted to look like you were going to a Victorian, debutante ball or something.
Yeah, he would have tried.
I think his classiness was up there. His time frame historically was perhaps not. So with Jessica, you got both the quality and not anachronistic old-timey reenactment clothing.
Yeah.
She is anachronistic in the sense that she's from the 1980s, but in the 1980s, fashion was such an ever-changing thing, and so she took that and kept it with her. Her anachronism goes towards her love of history and looking at art and such, but fashion, she was always on the forward edge of fashion.
So you guys showed up at this party not really knowing what to expect. You were kind of given another ambiguous task of like, okay, look, they're finally gonna look. Our only mission was to get this guy and whatever it is that he's got in his possession. We find the guy, we find the thing. Okay, and this is actually where you found out what the thing was too. The other deal you made with Erasmo was really, as you're kind of heading out the door of like, okay, he'll give me the stuff if you do the party. Actually, I take it back. The party deal was specifically for this information. If you go to the party, you have to agree to do this, and he'll tell you what you're actually getting, what it is that the prince has sent you to get. Because you don't even know what you're looking for. You just know you're looking for this guy who should have it in his possession. He reveals that you are looking for a contract which he may or may not have read the contents of, so to speak, which you then make the deal to find out, okay, well, what is it going to be? And that's where Riley actually stepped in and offered herself up as, okay, here's something I'll do to earn this information.
Yeah.
And she has to locate something for him using her gifts to be determined, when he needs something found, he'll call her up and she'll owe him that favor. It's a non-violent one, but in exchange for that, you found out that there is a contract between the prince and the current gangrel primogen, Marshall Hunter, that and the specifics were very important to the background of the story. Not very important to the mission. At the end of the day, you just need to find the thing. You don't care about the rest of the stuff. But the importance of it is that the prince, once upon a time, about 100 years ago, made a deal with the gangrel primogen, who was at that time not a primogen. In fact, the gangrel were not yet allied with the Camarilla in DC. The DC gangrel were more on the fence of staying independent because they were under the leadership of Jonathan Drake, who is, well, pretty independent he's only barely Sabbat on a good day. And so they were under his leadership at the time, and Marshall Hunter promised the prince that if the prince backed him as primogen and helped him achieve the primogen status, that he would commit the gangrel to the Camarilla in DC, including siding with the prince against the werewolves and, doing the dirty work of having to essentially throw themselves at the werewolves as fodder to, keep them at bay. And so, which the prince has definitely made good use of. So it was a key moment in the prince securing power early in DC, was that sort of switcheroo of dethroning Drake and installing Hunter. But to do so, he signed a blood contract agreeing that in exchange for this, the prince would name, at some point in the future, the prince would name somebody of Marshall Hunter's choosing to a political position of power. No questions asked, like he couldn't refuse. That was the deal, Now, at the time, the prince, of course, didn't imagine that the sheriff would open up, but Erasmo's speculation was that with the prince's brother having recently died, the sheriff position being open suddenly made a gangrel sheriff a very likely thing, that in a couple of days there'd be a meeting of the primogen, and if Marshall Hunter said, "Prince, I want you to name so-and-so," the prince would have to oblige by the contract if the contract was not destroyed prior to that. Which at that point you pretty much surmise this is why the prince wants you to find it in the first place. The prince doesn't want to have to actually pony up for that. that end of the deal.
Yeah,
and so
such an
since he already
important
has what he
position.
wants, yeah.
Yeah.
Whether because he doesn't want to give it away or because he's offended that, because it was his brother that was killed, and so he's offended that they would, use this contract to do something like that. It was never intended for, but I mean, it was true to the words of the contract. He just didn't expect his brother to be dead. But at the end of the day, you kind of surmised that your job was going to be to find it so it could be destroyed, so the prince wouldn't have to honor his side of it, since it was too late for the gangrel to back out. The gangrel were already committed. And Marshall Hunter, one thing that you guys maybe didn't focus on as much is Marshall Hunter sure as heck wasn't going to admit to everybody that the only reason he's Primogen is because he made a deal with the prince to become Primogen. Especially since, to do that, he had to defeat the very popular Jonathan Drake at the time. So that wouldn't look good for him, and that he committed the gangrel to a war against the werewolves, not because it was beneficial to them, but because it got him a position of power. He kind of threw his people into the breach for his own benefit. That was a little angle that really wasn't the focus of it, but But yeah, so you guys knew that was on the contract, knew that the contract was in Chu's possession, and that was what you gained from Erasmus. So you show up at the party, and it was a big mingling session. A lot of things happened there. A lot of big name faces. Anything in particular that, I mean, at the end of the day, the party was a pretty straightforward. You guys, hung out. You learned a lot of backstory about things, and you made a few connections. But the main goal of preventing an attack, because there was an attack, was served. But was there anything in particular that stood out about the party and kind of the chaos of all that?
So I will say,
see Tabitha.
Yeah, first off, Riley, I wasn't able to make one of the sessions, I believe it was. And then we had Riley get pulled away because the cairn, basically, she needed to go and service the cairn and return to her duties there. And so I did pull in Timothy as my character for the last part of this.
So the party was a two-parter, really.
Yeah.
And part one, Riley was there only briefly because you were not there.
Right.
She stepped out, literally stepped out.
Just had to go. I was like, sorry, we'll see you in the future.
Part two, you were there for as Timothy, who was actually a guest at the party. And so, yeah, go ahead, guys. What you got?
Well, Vincent ran into Tabitha getting her, I don't know, tattoo of initiation.
That was
Sabrina,
actually.
Sabrina, I'm sorry. I don't know why I said Tabitha. Yeah,
Sabrina. Lieutenant Tabitha Hill is
that's so. Yeah, he got to see Sabrina getting her her initiation, which to her was a big deal, and Vincent was really happy for her and congratulated her. And then there was. Isn't that the same night we also got into a fight and we ended up running? Yeah, we did. We ended up running down. Vincent ended up getting into a fight. And I think.
Oh, big surprise.
Yeah, right.
I think it's not fair, you guys. Jessica, Jessica, you stopped and helped him, didn't you? Or was it? Or was it Ringill? One of you two stopped and actually helped.
So that was night number 2 when the actual attack happened, right. And that was an interesting little transpiring of events there. But in the first part of the night, the first part or session of the evening party,
the park ranger.
Yeah,
we found the park ranger transformed into a sculpture of some sort.
Yeah, he was kind of calling back to a classic X-Files episode almost. Was the image that I mentioned as sort of a reference point was he was staked up on a pedestal in a sort of a side room as a viewing piece, kind of on a little plinth. He was staked up, and you actually couldn't tell it was a person at all, except that when you guys walked into the room, you met the mysterious Madame Cymbeline, the masked person who walked Trevor Chu out, who has kind of been pulling some of the strings and talked to you on the phone. And Erasmo mentioned working directly with her being his partner. And so you met Madame Cymbeline, who, like everyone else at the party, was wearing a mask. And she chatted with you and gave you some information, and just inconsequential connection making stuff mostly. But yeah, you were in a room with a plinth with a statue up on it, and as a display piece. And after she left the room, you took a second to study it and found that there were a pair of eyes looking out from the face of the statue. Because it was a Patrick O'Neill, sort of encased in sculpting clay to look like a grotesque, almost gargoyle-ish, with no wings, but with an almost gargoyle-ish figure, sort of staked in a crucified pose. But you picked up on a couple of things that you recognized, that apparently he was not a guest of sorts. He was with her, but he was not his guest.
Yeah, I think speaking of guests, another important detail was that this party wasn't just Camarilla, although it was under the guise of being a Toreador kind of meetup. It was also include Anti-Tribu, other Sabbat members, and then a lot of independents as well.
That was pretty important.
That was another important part to show like the cosmopolitan nature of Madame Cymbeline. And how she operates outside of DC and on the Virginia side, in Camarilla territory, presumably or ostensibly a Camarilla herself, but some things even with that didn't necessarily add up.
Yeah, and that was actually it was framed as it was her manor or her mansion, but it was a party hosted for the Toreador specifically, who are much chummier in general with their Anti-Tribu in some cities, and oftentimes just because at the end of the day, art is art, and whether that's smearing blood across the walls of your cave because you're a Sabbat or actual art. They live for their hedonistic pursuits, so they're a little bit more friendly with one another than some of the Sabbat and Camarilla. So that was on display. A little uneasy sort of mending of fences, so to speak. Although not everybody seemed super happy with the idea. Like Sabrina was definitely not real chummy with the visiting Sabbat, and pretty much stayed away from them altogether.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Madame Cymbeline obviously has friends with the Primogen. Stephen Wise was also there. The Primogen for the Tremere was there, and the Primogen for the Toreador was there. So she's got some strong connections on the DC side of the river as well. The Ranger wasn't just on display for no reason. Obviously, she did hint that he had been in her employ and decided to double deal and try to sell some of her secrets, which doesn't go over well with her. So that's why he was in the position he was in. But you also ran into Fairweather, since the Tremere were in attendance. You did get a chance to chat with her. Mm-hmm. Vincent did more. Since they were providing the refreshments in the form of a drug or a supernaturally drugged wine to make sure that the mortals in attendance, the party favors, wouldn't remember anything they saw, because there were a whole bunch of things going on.
And Fairweather was looking for Riley because she suspected the theft of the key.
That was another interesting point, because Riley left, and before she left the key in possession of Jessica. Now, that was another clue, and it was a pretty obscure one, but Fairweather did, or that was another reference, not a clue, because you guys already knew about the werewolf thing at that point, but it was a callback to that Riley taking the key made the security chief forget about it entirely. So Fairweather accused you of, like, I don't know what you did to my security chief, but the key that I put in his custody, like, I need that back, and I know you took it. Like, and she even mentioned that she was able to scry for the key itself because it was her possession. She was able to locate the key. She knows it was here, in this room even, up until just recently. Or she was looking for Riley in particular. Riley was gone, so where's the key? And Jessica played politic and just handed it over without any sort of trying to use it as leverage, even though again, the coterie displayed that it's got some weird tendencies of rolling in and turning people into bloody smears, and then also being real chummy and friendly and like easygoing with people, which is you make a lot of friends and enemies.
Well,
No, man.
the message really is be friends with us and we are going to be perfectly fine with you. Mess with us and you're going to be a bloody smear.
Yeah, it'll be a smear on the pavement. But yeah, she just handed over the key without too many questions. So we really won't, outside of just the players knowing stuff. Let's just say that there were some threads
What was
that
the
could
key?
have been pulled up.
What was the key for, John?
So there was a tidbit there. So before you went to the party, Riley went into the bathroom and was looking to go. She stepped sideways to see if she could track down Trevor Chew again, and she looked for him in the spirit realm since she couldn't seem to get a lock on him in the material world. And in the spirit realm, she felt him more strongly. Couldn't exactly tell where he was, but could tell he was somewhere there. But further away, kind of in a strange place. It was there that she kind of spotted, for lack of a better word, a spirit at the time, or what she thought was a spirit, but kind of a vague spirit sort of watching her, which she then kind of dug deeper and deeper into the Umbra, kind of went to places in the spirit realm that she wasn't used to going, specifically the astral plane, not somewhere she's very familiar with, kind of a sterile place for her people, and found Dahlia Khan still floating around, enamored, just following you guys around in an astral form, sort of obsessed with, well, Riley, really, and the aura. This, she couldn't get enough of seeing this. So you knew you had a little bit of a stalker, but she seemed pretty harmless. So the little connection there is, and this would be one of those things that early on our dear departed friend Heidi used to do a lot of the Auspex level 3 use of psychic impressions on objects. I expected at some point that Vincent, knowing that he had Dahlia entranced for a month, would ask her to use her Auspex, since nobody else in the group really had it except Ward, who wasn't there, would use that Auspex to figure out what the hell this key was and get a psychic impression on it. Did not, and in fact it did not, and Fairweather was pretty desperate for it. The key was to a lockbox storing a very important item to Fairweather in particular. And it is actually something that you guys will probably find out a little bit about. There is a ritual that the Tremere have, because you can wipe memories with Dominate, but those memories can be brought back by another user of Dominate who is powerful enough, and there's plenty of people who can do powerful enough in DC. I mean, the Prince can do it, certainly. Tons of people who could do it. It's not a foolproof way to make sure that you're not caught in a lie to wipe your memory of something. But the Tremere have a way around that. So they can just take the memory out of their head completely and store it in an object. And as long as that object isn't found by another user of blood magic, then it's safe and secure. And the person who had that memory forgets it completely, so completely that it cannot be retrieved like one with, say, Dominate could. On the other hand, if someone were to get a hold of said amulet and whatever that particular memory was, and put it in the hands of somebody who could deconstruct the amulet, or the item, the object, it doesn't have to be an amulet per se. It can be, usually it's a trinket of some sort. Then they could access the memory of the person stored in there and find out what the heck was stored on this thing. A little bit like the coins that we're carrying around, actually. A little bit like that. So whatever Fairweather stored in it was a memory. She didn't know exactly what the memory was, but knew enough to be nervous that she didn't want it found by anybody, and that had given that key and trust to her security chief to put one more layer of distance between her and this thing, because he certainly couldn't figure out what was on it. If you remember, he was a non-practitioner of blood magic, completely unable to use it at all. Not unheard of, a little bit shunned among the Tremere, but definitely, it happens. And so he would be the safest person to guard it, because he could never look at it himself. On the other hand, Ward could have deconstructed it for you. So that memory would have told you a little bit more about sort of what the Tremere's involvement was in terms of the arrangement of things. But I think you kind of got a little bit of the clues later on, just that they were involved in Marshall Hunter winning the fight in the first place. It was an actual fight to determine dominance over the gangrel. Hunter versus Marshall, and Hunter was the more powerful of the two, but he had the Tremere on his side, Hunter had the Tremere on his side, and there's a particular curse that's pretty effective against people with fortitude. That would have made the fight easier. So that would not be something necessarily that they would want to get out, that they played favorites in that fight either. They were trying to remain very neutral, very much, we just provide the contract. We're just the signatories. We're not involved in making, these changes. We're a neutral party. Mm-hmm. But there was a little more to it, but I won't get too deep into it.
Okay.
But anyway, that would have been a memory that you guys would have found had you dug into that particular thing. On the other hand, you did buy yourself quite a bit of favor just handing it over. She was very relieved and still owes you for that one, actually. Another one of those just pay it forward moments.
Oh, and if I could do one thing of player knowledge, which would be interesting if it can be revealed, is back at Erasmo's place, Jessica was certain she had seen her sire there, but her sire absolutely said he was never there. So what was that about?
There is... I'll assume at some point that Jessica may find out a little bit about that anyway, staying with Madame Cymbeline now, which is an interesting turn of events. Jumping forward in time, the coterie is now somewhat, at least Jessica is, and by extension, her roommates occasionally. Yep, and Heinrich.
Big time Heinrich.
Which means the Black Suns occasionally crash there too now, or can. Are staying with Madame Cymbeline. And so one of the things that she has her consorts, the kindred that she trains to be basically, what's the word I'm looking for?
Retainer.
Geisha type. It's kind of a geisha type thing, or even more than that. It's her spies, male and female, who are skilled in both telepathy, picking secrets out of your brain, obfuscate, being able to appear as somebody they're not, and that sort of thing, right? Doing the same thing. If they're a high-paid escort and they're sleeping with a very wealthy, or they're engaged with a wealthy, very powerful politician, what better way to pick secrets out of them than literally picking their brain for secrets? So one of their gifts to kind of getting good is that they can use Auspex combined with Obfuscate to appear as instead of just appearing as just anybody, they can appear as the person you trust the most or love the most, depending on how you want to interpret that statement. It could be an ambiguous love, which I asked you, if you remember, I gave you that little quiz there. Tell me about your character. And the person that Jessica loves the most or trusts the most was her sire. The closest thing to a romantic relationship that she has without actually being romantic, right?
Yeah.
So the sort of the chip in his back pocket to get you to agree to things was, if Erasmo needed to call in, help, was to have your sire sort of convince you that he was he's in good with Erasmo, and of course you should do this for him as a favor to him. The consort, the escort, was Madame Cymbeline's person. She had no idea who she appeared as necessarily. She just knows that when she uses the she instinctively, it's a combination discipline. You have to have a certain number of dots in Auspex and a certain number in Obfuscate, and you appear as the person that they trust or love the most. And so she just knows that she could use it, walk in the room, use that, and appear as somebody, and try and convince you to do what Erasmo wants you to do. So she was waiting in the wings, and you just happened to see her on the way out, sort of waiting to be called in.
So it wasn't Hill.
Nope. And it was actually Celeste, who you met later in the car, who Riley accused of being a caitiff. Or without knowing what a caitiff was, she mentioned that the person didn't seem to have... She used one of the werewolf gifts to determine that this person didn't have a clan. Mm-hmm. But yep, that was it's with them. It's all about illusion and mental tricks to pry out everything they can and turn around and sell it for whatever they can to broker power. So that includes appearing as someone you trust to try and find another angle to squeeze something out of you. That was just a little tease, since I didn't actually have to call him in to do that.
Yeah. Okay. She actually would not have followed up with it anyway. She's like, don't know what I saw then.
Yeah, well, it was an interesting conversation we had in text, just because at first you were inclined to be like, no, he's just being a rascal. He doesn't want to tell me the truth. He was there, that old dog, and so it was an interesting conversation that you sussed out. Was like, wait a minute, I guess he's telling the truth. It really wasn't him. So yeah. So at the party, a couple other little fun things happen here and there. Little fencing nonsense going on downstairs between some of the vampires. Sampling some of the party favors, all that sort of stuff. But then the big thing happened on night number 2, where you were looking to figure out who was responsible for the attack, and found out that the Russian who had attacked you was actually a guest at the party, and so you kind of glommed onto, well, it's got to be him for sure, and so you followed him around quite a bit, or tried to track him down, and ended up following the fake Beatrix Fairweather after you found her staked in a closet, and that ended up leading you downstairs to find
Things started devolving.
Yeah, pretty quickly, and that's where Vincent, where Rusty's remembering. Vincent opened the doors. You guys are searching the downstairs areas. You're looking for the Russian. You're thinking, what's going on? Like, there's a fake Fairweather running around, which means like some shit's actually going down. Maybe there really will be an attack. Madame Cymbeline was like, Erasmo's being overly cautious. It's no big deal. Nothing's going to happen. Just enjoy the party. You find a couple of people going nuts and doing crazy things in one of the bedrooms. Looks like some human guests are like holding someone down and doing something that you can't see. You guys, Regal and Vincent, break it up and end up in a fight with these guys, and are kind of trying to obey the party rules of like, look, don't kill people, right? But they are trying to they're actively like carving symbols on this guy's face, this conscious human's face, with what looks like some kind of knife implement of some sort. The rest of the coterie went off still looking really hastily, because the fake Fairweather was trying to find the Tremere Primogen. When last she encountered them, she said she was looking for the Tremere Primogen before they knew she was fake.
Yeah, and Timothy knew something was up, something was wrong. It was following the fake Fairweather through like the bathhouse part, and then into the bed, and then immediately engaged with what would turn out to be possessed. So our kind of first coterie involvement or engagement with demonic possession was there.
Yeah, the other half of the coterie found that. That was Heinrich, Ringil, and Jessica Heinrich and Jessica, I'm sorry, were first on the scene with the real Fairweather in tow, who located in sort of the Roman bathhouse looking section of the underground area. Found another sort of ritualistic thing going on, and did find the Tremere Primogen. He was in the sort of the back room.
Timothy found him, and then engaged with, was it Mr. Bones? And then the others didn't necessarily want to come in. It took them a few rounds, and it was Timothy in shadow form, trying to hold off the possessed that had taken over a lot of the human guests forcibly.
Heinrich was there, if you remember. Heinrich, for lack of a better way to describe it, noped the fuck out.
Yeah. It's like, I am not dealing with this shit at all.
Because what you came in and found was there was a large, maybe Greek or Italian looking man, kind of the big gold rings on his knuckles, kind of a larger dude, in the pool with a couple of very attractive women, scantily clad, or some of them not clad at all. Just living the good life, apparently wearing a bracelet, but a gold one, meaning that he was a human guest who was kind of in the know or special for some reason. Like he was not a party favorite, but he was definitely human. And was in the pool with a couple of ladies, including one vampire, and possibly 2 humans. And at first, they pinned him down and speared him with something, stabbed him in the chest with something, almost ritualistically or sacrificially. So Heinrich runs over there to help, and then this dude starts talking in a weird voice and starts calling himself Mr. Bones, and turning the ladies into freaky monsters with what looks like vicissitude. Starts warping them. Yeah. And so that very first turn, Heinrich ran over there and was like, I'm jumping into action. Heinrich, go. And then immediately was like, as soon as the Mr. Bones comes out and he's like, pass. I don't deal with demons.
Nope. No, I literally said that and walked out of the room. I think Mr. Bones had started to transform, I think, and had spikes and stuff, and I was like, okay, no.
Yep, his body was warping and twisting, and like his arms were elongating, and spears of bone were starting to come through his skin. And he was talking in a weird voice and calling himself Mr. Bones and asking for, where's Mr. Skin? Is that you, Mr. Skin? Are you here yet? And he seemed to be looking around for Mr. Skin. And all the while, fake Fairweather had run into the back room to attack Stephen Wise and his couple of people. And that's where Tim was, but Heinrich's reaction was perfect. It was great.
Yeah.
Just
like, no,
and
I'm good.
Because it was round 1, I'm going to run up and help. Round 2, nah. So
and passion. I love that.
That was. So
I have to come in and fight later anyway.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Vincent Regal did wrap up, and so inevitably we did go have a throwdown with a Mr. Bones, and Mr. Bones did transform several of the people closest to him, the female guests in the pool itself. He turned into like horrible abominations with vicissitude. You did notice later on that the rest of the human guests in the room, there were like 3 or 4 or 5 in the corners, seemingly couples sort of making out or whatever, just kind of huddled up or whatever. Turns out that they were all dead. But he did reanimate them at one point to come shuffling after you guys. And really, he kept clawing his way through the water prison that Wise kept throwing up. And eventually, you guys prevailed, although Tim did have a little bit of experience there due to another infamous botch. Remember botching Spiritus there, Aaron?
Oh yeah.
Remember that little visit from Carnarius because you botched your Spiritus?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. So that was the first time Carnarius figured out that he could take over Timothy because of the demonic presence near him. And was just absolutely dumbfounded because his portfolio was as like a Carnage. It was more of like he would do everything he could. He could actually physically manifest, and then through mirrors and whatnot, and targeted a lot of like different people in New York. And anyway, but he wasn't too big on possession, and so he ended up taking over. Yeah,
that was because Timothy, kind of one of our probably, I'd say, 3 major botches in our entire epic would be Heinrich botching Dominate to create a hunter. Timothy botched Spiritus in his attempt to call in spirits to aid him, animal spirits, local nature animal spirit, friendly spirits that would help him out. Instead, he called in Carnarius, essentially.
Yep.
And then, or opened the door, I suppose would be a way to do it. He was opening the door to spirits and instead opened the door to a demon that was possessing him after that. And then of course, Ward's problem later on, also botching. So, so that was a big moment. And the other big moment was Regal actually came in clutch for you guys big time. I don't know, Cedar, if you remember the like last minute, wait a minute, don't do that moment you had. Oh, Cedar stepped away to feed some animals too. I don't know if he's back yet. So his big thing, a little tidbit, if you were to do some research later on, little tidbit that I baked in there is that the implement that they were using in the room looked like kind of a wooden stake sort of thing, kind of an odd, like they had basically just broken off a table leg. It almost looked like a leg of a stool maybe, or a chair, a little short leg of something. And we're trying to, and we're carving things on this guy, and then we're going to impale him. Well, eventually, you got somebody reached in and pulled out. I think it was actually Vincent finally did it. Reached in and pulled out the central thing that was speared into Mr. Bones as well, and that shut him down pretty good. And he also had one of these things in him. However, there was another vampire a little bit, shortly thereafter, a few minutes later, that you needed to stake, and so. In fact, one of Madame Cymbeline's guards, one of the 3, she refers to them as her hounds, even though that's not not in the title sense. They are her 3 gangrel bodyguards, essentially. And one of them turned traitor, it turns out, and was the one who instigated this whole demonic presence attack. That's how all of these crazy cultist types got into the party in the first place, how they got past security. It was an inside job. It was her, or it was him, and he alluded to her actually being not what she said she was.
Yep.
Which I think you guys kind of heard rumors of her being Kadif later on as well. So you needed to stake him after he speared who you thought Madame Cymbeline was. He attacked her. So you responded by restraining him, and you were going to stake him with the wooden implement you found in the other room. That was one of 3 stakes, though, that were being used to summon these demons. They weren't stakes at all. They were actually the 3 legs of a stool used to hang a man, and it was a ritualistically prepared implement to. It was referred to as a focus by some of the occult members of the group. And it was the focus that was used to summon these 3 demons into the world. Well, only 2 of them had made it in so far, and you interrupted one of those 2. But you damn near speared a vampire with the very thing that was being used to summon these demons or to bind them to the form that they were in. So if you had speared him, you were about to start another fight as he transformed into Mr. Skin. Which Cedar piped up like, wait a minute. Did we just stop them from doing blood? Maybe don't do that. Let's not stake him with this.
Yeah, Vincent was about to stake him when Ringo piped up and said that, and he held.
Yeah, because nobody came to the party with any weapons, of course. Because, well, I mean, it's a party. You don't show up with your guns and your stakes and your batons and stuff.
Well, and so he hasn't seen the summoning yet, so he just saw like, oh, well, there's a stake there, and he wasn't going to stop Vincent. So
yeah, thank God Ringo said something.
Yeah,
that would have probably been our first vampire possession.
Yeah, I wonder if you guys would have survived that fight.
I think there might have been enough other vampires at the party who could have helped at some point or might have intervened, but the carnage that would have been caused to the guests would have been... It was pretty contained. Like, the room was sealed pretty quickly after you guys got into it, and kept contained. So really, the only people who know about the demonic attack are the Tremere Primogen, Fairweather, Cymbeline herself, of course, who seemed to understand what was going on, and the coterie. So the rest of the guests don't know about her little demon problem showing up and like whatever was going on there. That's and they claim to be, they did claim to be servants of a just minor demons, servants of something, something bigger coming, which you did find out later on, of course. It did show up in DC. I'll give you a little player tidbit too. Here's a little backstory thing that you actually have all the facts, but as players you didn't catch, but your characters, at least one or two of you would have noticed. Or drawn, especially Tim. When you walked in the room, and there were 2 people who walked in the room. I want to say Jessica actually did at one point, but I could be mistaken.
I did actually, yes.
When the fight broke out, there were 2 people in the room with Stephen Wise in the back room of the bath area. Kind of like a steam room almost, adjoining the bath area, the pool. And in that room, it was Stephen Wise and 2 seemingly human females, one of whom was unconscious and off to the side, and the other whom he was actively draining blood from. And now when fake Fairweather came in and attacked the Primogen, the human woman who he was draining blood from just sat there in a stupor after they went up and went toe to toe, and Timothy was fighting, and you guys took care of fake Fairweather pretty quickly. Timothy did specifically, definitely disabled her pretty quick, and eventually the human guest came out of it, the one he had been draining, came out of it and was, kind of cowering in the corner the whole time and ignored by everybody pretty much. And then you had Mr. Bones to deal with, so everybody kind of ignored her. And then Madame Cymbeline stepped out of that room towards the end of the fight to confront, after the demon was subdued. She also came out of the room, and you never saw her in there. So I don't know if anybody made the connection that the woman that Stephen Wise was draining was actually Madame Cymbeline, which would imply a blood bond between the 2. Now, Tim would have seen that and have made the connection once she emerged. Very skilled obfuscate user. Definitely no way anybody was going to see through it, even with Auspex. But making the connection that there was no Madame Cymbeline in the room 1 minute, and then that guest was gone and there she was. The next was definitely one of those things that at least her and I think Jessica probably would have eventually sort of been like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a connection between several of the Camarilla clans and her, regardless of her supposed neutrality and or not wanting to interfere with the prince or step on his toes. But yeah, so you resolved that tidily, and really, the story kind of wrapped up abruptly. We had to take a little bit of a break for some personal reasons, and then Aaron was gone for a stretch. Steve did join the coterie, and he's not here, of course, but Steve joined up as Ward's roommate, who got called into, actually by Madame Cymbeline herself, a request from him, kind of calling back to the Boston precursor story that he did.
Yeah, so I ran a Boston intro session really for Scott, to play his character, what would be Steve, and there, we ran through the Boston possessed war, which was something that I've referred to a couple times in the last story, but basically the prince or princess of Boston was a Toreador, a very cosmopolitan Toreador by the name of Seneca Duval. And, she had been running a good ship that had been, operating pretty effectively with multiple supernaturals kind of recognized and offered, to operate within the city under, under their protection or whatever. So there's a lot of kind of activity, a good place to go. However, there had been a problem with a fast multiplying possession that had occurred, and basically where an entity had made itself known after the players specifically were tasked with going and apprehending a Bali that had not identified or introduced themselves to the prince, despite operating in her city. And so upon hearing all of the possessions and actually having a serious possession issue where this entity had a number of probably dozens and dozens of people in a very similar fashion to what you guys would run into later, basically storm the prince's office, including getting all the way to the prince with human bodies, essentially, all dying en masse and very quickly to you, but just overwhelming the defenses, and ended up going and basically starting a war with the vampires and what would pull in other supernaturals and everything into its own, into that whole story. And then, with the players, so Ward being a fledgling vampire, as well as Steve being, a fledgling gangrel, the two of them would kind of explore their origin stories, but at the same time, have him sort of learn the ropes of role-playing and everything. So it's kind of a twofer. And then we were able to, tie that directly into sort of what's going on based on Ward's story, John's story, excuse me. And Ward's story, and then pulling Steve's character into the fold, again, sort of with this gem, and the Tremere there, sort of calling in all favors and all stops. They now working directly with Madame Cymbeline. They all ended up working together and trying to figure out, what the hell does this really mean, and is it as bad as we suspect it is? So, but no, we ended up. There's another, the crucial end session for yours, though, was sort of finding out what the players wanted to do with. So they would end up locating the treaty, the agreement.
That was a so one thing I'll also say is that because we know this now, flash forward to the three wise men, we know now that Madame Cymbeline, at very least, is Seneca Duval.
Is Seneca Duval, and that was another favor that Ben had Heinrich basically go and to provide the because they're like, we have some good information that directly involves you from what we hear, we'll give it to you, if you guys want to agree to something. And Heinrich's like, all right, I'll take you on. I'm very curious. And
that was his way of dealing in human life. currency.
Yeah, same kind of deal. And but with the three wise men instead of being with Erasmo. And anyway, they're like, yeah, we're looking at all of our reports and everything else. What ended up happening at the end of Boston in the story was that all of the Primogen eventually kind of figured out that this massive undertaking, this huge deception had occurred, where Seneca had actually claimed to be a Toreador then, but wasn't actually a Toreador and was in fact a caitiff. And due to power hungry, other vampires and factions that didn't like how cosmopolitan she was and how open she was, because it impacted them directly in negative ways. They all, basically there was kind of like a coup that happened in Boston. And so while the demonic entities had been beaten back and hunted to near extinction in that area, it opened the door, weakened her, and she had called in as many favors as she could to deal with that threat. But then was sort of, from behind, backstabbed, and then kind of, people didn't know if she had been, met the final death or was diablerized or was forced out once it finally came to the conclusion that she wasn't actually even a Toreador, but rather a caitiff. And so she, presumably everybody had lost track of her and went around their own separate ways, and Boston does what Boston does. But she ended up, so they are pretty sure she's Seneca Duval, just under a different alias.
Very well kept alias, a very tightly controlled one that nobody else, even for the most part, the people who work for her, even Steve, who was called in by her.
Yeah,
Steve was called, actually, the way we brought Steve in was Steve was called in kind of based on his experience with demons in the past, and he did lean into sort of that, in between now and then he had a bunch of hunter experience, hunting down demons and stuff. And so he was called hunting in down by her.
He was sort of the secret agent that would infiltrate, Bali cabals and try and rout them and betray them ultimately to being hunted down and destroyed and forced out of Massachusetts. And then, so that was what he was known for eventually, and he would be able to.
His acquiring the discipline Demoinian,
right?
So that he could or Diamoinian, or however you say that, so that he could blend in more. But yeah, no. So the big thing is she even called him in under the pretense of, well, you were referred to me by, the former prince, by Seneca Duval. I've heard you had connection. You get good reference. So come in and help me with this. Run security on this demon issue I've got. Mm-hmm. Because of course she had actually, obviously, as we found out later, she is Seneca Duval. So she has worked with. She was his prince at one point during the demon incursion. So it wasn't a reference unless she was telling herself. But it is what he was told at the time, because he was not made privy to her secret either. Until obviously the three wise men sort of spilled it. And Aaron, I just want you to know that I brought up the human life thing, and I pulled that out of my ass. It seemed like a very vampire-y sort of vague. It felt like a very vague set of terms. Like, okay, what are we gambling with? Well, a gentleman's bet. It's one favor not to exceed the value of one human life. That sounds vampire-y as fuck. Yeah. And little did I know I would start apparently a trading Ponzi scheme of human life.
Vampire as fuck.
Well, then Ben takes it and runs with it and is getting all Heinrich on everybody. Like, he's just loving this. Like, Heinrich's going around being like, well, I'll trade you for, 2 human lives or 1 kindred life, not to, it's got an exchange rate on it even.
Yeah, to Heinrich. I mean, the wise men were like elders. And so he was like, well, better not start with money.
Yeah,
they probably
don't really care about money. Well, then the Claires got a hold of the freaking contract too. It was like,
which was the at the end of the day, the only thing I really strongly defined is I put a bunch of things out there and said, look, this is what's gonna, this is what exists. Let's see what you guys figure out. I don't know if it'll be confusing. I don't know if you'll figure it out right away. It could be a 2-day session. But at the end of the day, the one thing you were going to have to resolve somehow was, once you found the contract, what do you do with it? And the big reveal being, the contract isn't a thing that you can simply take from Trevor. He is the contract. He's carrying the contract inked into his skin. So to destroy the contract is to destroy him. And the Tremere were pretty clear, or even Ward was pretty clear, that a contract can only be destroyed by fire. You can't just tear it up. You can't, there's not an easy way to just get rid of it. You got to burn this thing by fire.
That makes a lot more sense now.
You were also warned not to Diablerize him if you found him, and that may have sounded like some Camarilla, like, he's not. He may have turned traitor or something, but you're not allowed to Diablerize him. That was a little more than just don't do it because that's bad. It was don't do it unless you want to be the next contract, because it will pass to whoever did that. So that would have been a very unfortunate set of circumstances at least for the next few days until the Gangrel called in, and the contract would have gone away once the Gangrel side had been fulfilled. But had somebody Diablerized him, you'd have been in hiding for a week or so, because you'd have been next on the list to dispose of. But
man, given our proclivity for Diablerie, that was a likely outcome.
It was a very possible outcome.
I very much had that in my head as what could happen, and I was like, well, if it happens, it happens. And Aaron told me to run with, there were no rules. He'll just play with what I've got, and I'll play with what he's got. So I basically twisted his arm on, look, you've left the sheriff vacant, so here's my side story. Yep. Whatever happens with the players will determine who the next sheriff is. If they don't do it, then the prince will name who he wants. Or if they succeed, he'll name who he wants. If they fail, or if they choose not to do it, like they don't destroy the contract or whatever, then the Gangrel get it. That's how it works. Yep. And the chips fall where they may. And so you guys did find, ultimately you found, dealing with a Tremere, you're going to have Dominate in place. So you did show up at that marina full of dominated humans, essentially kind of covering for him where he'd been hiding out. He had clearly dominated the the higher generation Ravnos driver, and was using the Ravnos driver to sort of mask his presence with some illusion on that boat. But then the other big thing was he was concealing himself in the astral plane in that mirror as a means to essentially sleep safely or hide out safely until he knew he only had to wait out the contract, because the contract was coming due. So all he had to do was stay in hiding, and it would fulfill his obligation to protect what he thought he was supposed to protect. And that's what the Tremere wanted too. They wanted to find him and bring him in to keep him safe, because they were paid to write this contract and they're supposed to store this document. It's like, it'd be like the title to your house. The bank's not just going to give it to anybody who walks in, which is why it was stolen from them in the first place. So ultimately, the Coterie decided not to destroy it, but to allow the Dayman to destroy it, to take it to him and to allow the Dayman to destroy it. So accomplish the same thing essentially without necessarily sacrificing their humanity, because that would have been pretty messed up to burn a vampire alive, even to fulfill a pretty underhanded set of dealings. And so that's where we kind of wrapped up with that. Is as a result, the Coterie specifically allowed the appointing of Reggie Ardog to the sheriff by virtue of blocking the contract.
Yeah, and so from my perspective, I was kind of waiting to see what the Coterie did, because so the whole meeting, and this just goes right back to when I took over for the jamming, but the whole thing was still going to go down. What happened at the reveal, but there would have been the Gangrel coming and basically saying, "Nope, we're going to execute this." And, basically provide Trevor Chu and say, this is, we are taking the sheriff position by force and by agreement. And the prince would have had to basically agree. Now, what that means is I basically had it in my mind that the prince doesn't actually have a seneschal. The prince here used his brother, the sheriff, as a seneschal, and had both positions just because he's a prince. He could. He had those two positions merged. He would separate those two out and then what would be Ardog would then take the seneschal. But yeah, we can jump into the next part. So the prince basically had invited all of you to a great reveal, and the players knew that they were, the vacant position of the sheriff, and that position would have to be filled. And so there's a lot of scuttlebutt that was what was going to happen. And you guys end up showing up. The first session was a very political one. There was no fighting, no combat, really. You guys ended up going to this party at the prince's office in the Watergate, and
at his request, even though too.
Yeah.
He personally requested us.
Exactly. He requested you guys as a coterie. He requested, all the major players in DC. He wanted their presence for this major event. And what ended up happening is, as you guys were starting to get settled into the party, the doors flew open, and almost in like an old school, medieval torturous way, this wooden wheeled contraption was brought in. And basically, you would end up seeing a staked and severely tortured Jonathan Drake naked there, basically crucified to the what looks like a catapult structure, and Visqueen was all laid out on the floor in the center of his of this room, and all of the furniture and everything was pushed to the side, and he was wheeled up into the middle. And basically, at the helm of that, coming around was, Ardog, who came forward and basically, presented this Sabbat elder gangrel to the prince in exchange for, favoritism, to show his willingness to step it up for the Camarilla and recognize the prince's aggression as the rightful way to proceed. And so, the coterie would find out then that it was Ardog. He had been gone. So they had been assigned away from Ardog after he had been, took the carnal punishment on your behalf during that trial. And then you guys got assigned to Lieutenant Hill. Well, in the background, he was licking his wounds, and then he went on basically a crusade, for lack of a better word, to go and basically attack this pack that is in pretty set aside from the other Sabbat, both in mentality as well as on the map physically. They're sort of on their own, so they made him a target. And since he knew right where to go, based on your guys' intel that you guys provided, he used everything that you guys had, including getting an audience with him, which allowed him to do a sneak attack. Stake Jonathan Drake immediately, and then basically used his other guys to round up and either kill or subdue all of the pack and basically all of Jonathan Drake's, quote unquote family. So they rounded most of them up, with a few exceptions, like Rory, and but most of them were there and staked. And he basically said that he was going to, provide all of them as boons in the form of just free diablerie to his lieutenants and anybody who showed that they were willing to be, faithful to his ways, and his, desire to purge the Sabbat from their midst and secure the capital and the surrounding areas for the ivory tower. So lots of things going on. I know that there was a lot of sense to sin on Steven's part, and then Jessica was reading the thing. Heinrich was, everybody was having discussions and trying to, figure out what was going on, and see. There's definitely kind of a lot of things that was learned. Do you guys remember any of those things that stick out for you in particular?
It's been a while.
It has, but you guys had that. There was not all was well with the some of the Primogen that did not seem to like what was happening with Jonathan Drake specifically, but also, how aggressive this move was.
Yeah,
overall.
Jessica was talking kind of almost in code to several of them. The Gangrel Primogen.
Marshall Hunter.
Also,
yep.
Yes, and also, oh God, no. Not the Toreador. The Ventru Primogen, her own Primogen, also, and she was like, "Oh, well, this is an interesting turn of events," and she subtly signaled that she was also on that same page with them regarding the prince.
Yep. Yes, there's definitely some that were. I mean, obviously, you guys remember. Another Sabrina showing, a newly changed, newly tattooed Sabrina coming to the show as well. And then even stepping up to the body on the Visqueen and sticking her fingers in the wounds and laughing as she's basically torturing the guy. So there's that difference as well. And then a lot of other, kind of side talk, about diablerie and whatnot and people vying for some of those vampires that'll meet unfortunate ends, and forced to be done in front of Jonathan Drake. So that was the one thing that the prince just boasted about, that he would be perfectly that he would provide these as gifts to the faithful, and but they would be done in front of and that Jonathan Drake would be kind of the last to suffer and suffer the longest. So anyway,
I think that's also at the same time when Vincent approached Reggie and told him that, he was sorry for his actions and causing him, what happened and blah, blah, blah. They kind of had a moment of, well, at least Vincent had a moment of, look, man, I fucked up, but I got your back from here on out, no matter what. That's also, I think, the same night that he noticed that Reggie was kind of giving the prince those side-eyed glances, like even he wasn't really sure what he was up to. Like he was following orders per se, but you can tell that there was something not sitting right with Reggie about the prince. And yeah. I think he even brought that up, and Reggie was like, not here.
Yeah. And he even seemed to not necessarily like what he even had done to Jonathan Drake.
Right.
But it was kind of an extreme example of, a hound. He was already a hound, but he was also disgraced in a way because you guys, of your actions and his inability to control you guys, and willingness to take the brunt of the damage for you guys, insofar as making sure you're not punished as a coterie, but as individuals. And so anyway, he had to do something pretty significant in order to get back in the good graces of the prince. And solidify himself a good position. And so he has apparently done that with this move, but, definitely something wasn't sitting well with him. And you guys would find out more about that and things that kind of strengthened that challenging, where you're starting to see kind of these major seeds of, what the hell's going on with this prince. Maybe this is actually something we need to act on more directly. So let's see here. That was about it for that one. Unless anyone wants to talk, anybody have anything else that really stands out to them from that session? We'll give you a couple seconds and then we'll just move on to the next one. So we started really more offline, but I really started talking to Jessica's Raven about a contact that had reached out to her from China, from Eastern China, in the form of Dr. Raymond Nur Xinjiang Museum, from Xinjiang Museum, that wanted to send the Tejim mummies to DC Smithsonian for a special exhibit. But eventually, Jessica kind of found out, there's other kind of motive behind that. Do you remember what that was?
Yeah, well, I know that she was trying to smuggle them out of the country because there's a lot of political upheaval in the country, and she was afraid that the mummies were going to be destroyed.
Yes. So definitely, and so you were using your DC Smithsonian contacts to put on and basically agreed to a special exhibit So, anyways, there was that kind of happening all in the background. The coterie was invited to meet with the three wise men. So this is going back to an earlier conversation we had, but you guys ended up going to a steakhouse, a real steakhouse, and basically getting to go upstairs and meet with these three really short vampires. And I keep kind of pointing this out, and I guess it's just kind of an interesting point that I want to just make, just so you can kind of know why I'm going with some of these descriptions. But I don't know. Does anyone get the short reference before I?
Sorry, can you repeat that? The short reference to what?
Whenever I'm describing some of these vampires, I often describe them as, whether they're in particular, I'll say they're particularly short. I don't know if you guys.
I just figured it meant that they were very, very old, because people in historical times were short in stature, a lot of times due to nutrition.
Exactly.
Yeah, depending on the time period in the civilization we're talking about. Like if you grew up during like the bubonic plague and you returned then, there's probably a good chance that you're a short peasant or something.
Yeah. Well, overall, it's very short. You could have quite a bit on the average. I mean, you still have some tall people or whatever, and it depends on the culture too. But in this case, there are three guys that are there, and they're all fairly short. They have a great interest in you guys, so there's a lot of kind of fun conversations. A lot of that for me was just like you guys meeting sort of three independent vampires that are really old, just sort of allowed to operate because they are what they are, and they're very much into information peddling, but on the non traditional vampire lanes. So even other supernaturals and other things they're very interested in, all things, also within the vampire, the more traditional Camarilla and even, Sabbat stuff, but particularly with the independents and then also other supernaturals. But they wanted to meet with you guys. From their part, they had heard that you guys had been interacting with a werewolf. You'd been interacting with the Ravenous, also with Madame Cymbeline. So, they were basically like, yeah, it's time we meet you. Let's go ahead and have this conversation. And a lot of this is predicated on, you guys had been basically asked by Ward to come back into the fold for him and to help him sort of track down leads on the whole Black Diamond. So the possessed object that had been taken from Evan's items there. And so this was one avenue that you guys could go to try and find out just some information. I had originally talked with both John and Rusty offline with different, for Ward, and then Rusty for Cade, which is his main character, or one of his other main characters that was with Timothy. And so basically had them on the whole, we did a couple little side emails, but everybody got busy and sidetracked and did their own thing. So basically we pulled everybody back that way and back together with Ward, and then gave them, sort of a task to do and to complete, which was to find this damn diamond, and also the wayward apprentice that ran off with the diamond, to figure out what was going on there. So you guys met with the three wise men, and I don't know, any interesting takeaways from that you guys remember or recall, or?
Yeah, I'm not going to be able to give them the diamond in any sort of deal. I was considering it if they taught me some awesome discipline or something.
Yep.
I was considering trading the diamond. Guess that's not an option now.
Not so much. No.
Well, and I remember they had special wines and stuff from humans who were ingesting specific types of foods to flavor the wines.
Exactly. Oh. So the blood that they served you guys was basically bled from humans, that had been eating specific foods on a very specific diet for like a month at least prior to.
Such a slaughter of vampire blood consumption. Yeah. It was grotesque, and I'll be honest, Ward not being a big fan of not being all that caught up in the mundane physical nature of things, it seemed a little douchey and pretentious. look, drunk is drunk, wine is wine. It's not that fancy. Stop sniffing your drink and drink it. And he was not impressed. I get why the Ventru in the group might have been. But I was just like, you know what, it seems over, you know, from the character's perspective, it was a bunch of pretentious elder stuff for people who were bored with their 1,000-year lifespans.
Yeah. I mean, there's that. It was more just to kind of explore, well, if you did have 1,000 years, and if you were like in that situation, you'd be like, yeah, blood isn't blood. You know what? Let's see what happens if we do this, you know? And it could be very well that it's like, you know, beluga caviar, where, hey, actually this shit doesn't taste all that great. But people are like, ooh, it's, you know, super expensive, so it tastes amazing, you know? It could be that. But I also figure, you know, they say you are what you eat, and, you know, people can, you know, if you feed certain, you know, animals certain things, it can change their taste as well, for sure. So
I figure
it's like having steak prepared one way for years and years and having it every single freaking night. All of a sudden, it tastes like Rosemary's. It's like, hey, that's kind of good. That's different.
Yeah.
I like that.
And they can't eat the food normally anyway.
Right.
Well, see, the thing is I liken it to the where your feelings might fall on, say, like wine tasting, and you know, yes, there's a difference between really bad wine and decent, you know, with any alcohol. But there's a certain point at which, like, the official whiskey taster is just like making up words to describe things that they're saying. These notes of things. And you're just like, well, maybe there is something to it. Maybe you have a refined palate and that's what you know, whatever. Or maybe you're kind of just like, you know, give me a Bud Light and I don't care, you know? And so I'm definitely in character. I was more on the side of like, dude, blood is blood. It's here to sustain me so I can do magical things. It's not here to, you know, get all weird about Kobe blood, essentially. But very well played, though, because it very much is like, I could see people getting into weird stuff like that.
Yeah.
We do it with food, so...
It was just me to kind of explore, be like, well, what do I think? I mean, how would I make, like you say, a very pretentious elder, like they basically are kind of untouchables within, but they also don't, like, exert themselves politically over anybody. They just sort of are there, and they're three guys from three different clans that just sort of exist and are very interested to, you know, find ways to sort of satiate their boredom almost, in a way.
It's the vampire gourmand society.
Right? I mean, they're powerful in their own way, like they are, and nobody wants them to fuck with them. But, you know, I wanted to, like, give in, like, they're interested in sort of exploring, you know, things that you might not think about as a human. Like, well, you know, all you're doing is drinking blood. Well, okay, but you can make blood taste different ways.
It's, you know, the guy
presumably.
who says, like, this wine can only be made from the grapes grown on the south side of this hill because the acidity is this way, and it's, you know, yeah, it's exactly that.
Yeah. Oh, totally. No, I'm glad you guys picked up on that, because I actually I was proud of myself. I put in some time into that. As ridiculous as that is.
As a human being full of blood myself, it sounded like a very unpleasant way to have indigestion for a month and then be eaten.
Right?
So some of it was like, oh God, you would make me eat nothing but this stuff for a month?
Yeah.
Just kill me now, man. Just kill me now.
Dominate them. They don't remember shit.
I can't eat another lobster, man.
Please, no. I don't want to eat another one. I'm not a vegetarian. Stop making me eat the spinach. So yeah, there was definitely some interesting discussions too, though. You guys got your first sort of clue, because one of the taskers that originally Rusty's other character had been given is to find, like, a good link for the Bali, so we can, you know, because they're suspecting they're behind it in some way. And, you know, all the stones had turned up negative, but in this case, the three wise men were like, we'll just give it to you for free because we like you. You know, we're having an interesting conversation, so this is a freebie. And they basically gave you the address of a Devin Morales, and who was at, like, an occult shop in downtown D.C. and was just operating that occult shop through there, but was indeed a confirmed Bali, and that was who they basically gave up. They offered to go and get them for you and bring them before you if you wanted, but it would be at a price, right? And you guys are like, we'll just do it ourselves, which was fine. And Another one is that Heinrich bargained for information on Madame Cymbeline, which we've already talked about, but basically, where he basically found out that they believe that she is the princess or ex-princess Seneca Duval from Boston. And then they also informed Jessica of the Setites' interest in her. So, let's see here. That was it. So, anything else you guys want to mention? That's what I have on my notes here.
I don't recall anything else specific. Not towards Jessica, anyway.
Yeah. So the next one had you guys going to the occult shop to apprehend Devon. How'd that go for you guys?
It went smashing. It was great. There was no... I mean, we got in, we got out. It was
pretty smooth, actually. I mean, with the one exception, Heinrich tried to go in. You guys had found out that it was warded. So it was warded, so suggesting thaumaturgy of some level. But, yeah, you guys... And then Heinrich tried to go in and was starting to feel the effects and tried to engage with the teller, who is himself not Devon. But, you would see 3 very large cats in there as well, like, Maine Coon, but, much more sleek, probably more bobcat style size, that appeared to be incredibly intelligent for their part. And so you guys ended up finding a way, though. You had 2 people come from from the back of the shop, and then you guys came back into the main part of the shop through the front, and you found a Devon who was looking like he was trying to, get ready to leave, but then seeing that the back was also had already been breached, and then you guys had come in through the front and basically was like, all right, well, I'm done. Can't do anything about this, and I don't want to get everybody killed, so, I surrender kind of thing. So... anything else you guys remember from that one?
Well, Stephen, he's the one who used, I think he's the first one that he was there, right? He was the first one to use the animalism to get... Wait, Ringle and Steve, they went in a different way.
Yeah, they went through the back.
Right, and they used the animalism to at least get one of the cats from attacking them.
Yeah, for their part, I actually used the bobcat, kind of not large cat, but the bobcat stats, and I ghouled it. So they were both actually technically ghouls with their own stats, and originally it was actually possible to have a combat. The human was basically gonna cower behind the register and not get involved in any way. It was basically between whoever was there and the cats, with the all ever-present ward that would be constantly doing bashing damage to everybody, right? And so that one was basically like, kind of a wild card in a way, like eventually damage would come through on you guys. So it was just something that, would add a little bit of an extra stressor. And then Devon himself, I did have him statted out in case that went to combat. But the way in which you guys all were able to breach, nobody failed their will save to enter. You guys came in force. You came in quick. You went right to him, and then basically told him to stand down, as opposed to just straight up attacking him, in which case he would defend himself. I think it worked out really well for you guys. It actually was pretty smooth. He surrendered and kind of gave the information a little bit that he kind of felt like his time was short anyway. That he was sort of a marked vampire, and in the back, the coterie did find a series of other interesting tidbits. Cedar, are you there yet?
Yep, I'm here.
Yeah. Do you remember what you found in the occult shop of the Bali Devon Morales? Might not.
Not off the top of my head.
Yeah, it's all right. It's gem cutting equipment and a lot of like demonic literature, and so about how like some pretty occult-related gem items that are known throughout the world. And basically, you find also a number of like what looks to be sacrificial items or items used in sacrifice to different degrees. And so anyway, you guys end up basically capturing him, bringing him back to the Tremere for questioning. But you do kind of get the pretty strong impression that he is actually unable to talk about either his cabal or the gem specifically. So you guys did ask him a couple of questions. He wasn't able to answer anything. So that was that. You did take him back to the Tremere Chantry, and they tried to ask too, but they confirmed that he's under a magical. He's compelled magically not to reveal certain pieces of information. Actually, two separate compellings to not do so, and he basically so Magistrate Malleus was trying to work with him as much as he could to find out some information. And about the best he could do was relay where the Tremere that had run away with the gem had gone, and that was sort of gave you your next step. But before you guys would leave, the next as you're waking up, you would find Timothy basically attacking Devin Morales, but acting very strangely, and you guys would run into Timothy in the second time as Carnarius. And basically between you guys and Cade, you had to stop him. And with Magistrate Malleus staked him. So Timothy was staked. And the demonic entity basically was starting to like utilize Tim's powers, his disciplines, and try and figuring out kind of how to drive this thing. And became really, really nasty. And then that's when you guys found out, well, he was in New York a week prior to it, and they had basically taken on this demonic entity. They had stopped him and dropped him using a ritual, but they didn't necessarily know exactly what the ritual did, just that the entity sort of was, they believe, banished. But apparently what ended up happening is actually it bound it to him. So now one of his personalities is this Carnarius entity. So let's see here. Devin did drop, and he did say where Shayna was at, a safe house in southern Maryland. So the coterie traveled to the location, but as they were traveling, you guys decided to do a whole bunch of different things. So you guys broke off into different groups. So Jessica had set up a request with the Setites at the Egyptian embassy in DC to figure out what the hell, what do they know, and basically to go and admit and see what they needed and what they wanted, make sure everything was good and kosher. Steve went to cash in his boon with the prince and got an armory. It's unfortunate he's not here to talk about it, but he also agreed with the prince to for an extra boon, or an extra addition to the boon, to work with Megadon Technologies to produce special weapons and supply them to the prince and those loyal to the prince. And the others went to see the Messiah, who is apparently held up at a local soup kitchen right on the Virginia-Maryland border. Anything along those you guys want to talk about? I'm looking at you, Jessica.
Yeah, well, she did indeed have the meeting with the followers of Set, although she was hoping to go to that meeting on fairly even footing and talk to them more, on a more level. I don't know, I can't think of the word. It's already 10 o'clock, so my brain is fried. But she initially was thinking that she would go in to talk with them in a polite conversation. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
just
on
a
their
polite, civil
terms.
conversation. Right, exactly. And that she would present them, and she wasn't going to lie. She was never intending to lie to them or anything. But when she got there, it quickly became apparent that they were immediately considering her an enemy, and possibly someone to dispose of. And so she was abducted, stripped naked, and put into a room to interrogate.
Yep. And so they basically, did all of that. And this was all done offline. So none of the other players were aware of any of this. Basically, we ended that previous session with you saying you were meeting them. And then I was like, I'll take it to email. And then we went back and forth pretty significantly for email. And it started off with them basically saying, okay, we've heard that you're using our discipline. And we have a number of our members that are missing, and we have not been able to summon them or contact them. We believe you've destroyed them. We're going to give you a chance to come clean, and we'll make your death quick, kind of situation. Well, of course, she's professing her innocence. So they bring in a Kassid, who is a specific kind of vampire that has their first power, is Methroseria, I think it's called, that allows them to, if they bleed from like the ears to the eyes, they can detect lies, basically. So they detect when people are lying, and so they ask her a whole series of questions, and she answers them all truthfully and to the best of her knowledge. She had never diablerized the Setites. She looked at the pictures of them and was like, yes, I have not diablerized any of those people. And I have gone through and utilized your discipline, but I apologize. That's why I'm here. And so they're kind of confused at this a little. They're like, well, she's actually telling the truth. So do we want to just kill her? And all the while, they brought in one of their members who was a master infiltrator and basically had this person also stripped down and look Jessica over, and then basically formed into Jessica and would stand in for Jessica for, a session basically or two, however long it took until they decided they were going to release her based on how, kind of helpful she was in this whole interaction. And so what I told Raven is I was like, okay, so we're going to play it this way. You're going to play your character, and she has only surface memories of you. She doesn't have any deep memories. None of you can drop little hints if you want that something's a little off. You could play her a little more aggressive or however you want. Like, you have free reign to play Jessica, because it's this imposter, this imperfect imposter, although it rolled really well to do the imposting. And so it was basically it was that, like, Raven did an awesome job. I think that was kind of fun for us.
It was very fun. And one of the first biggest hints I did was Jessica, who was always saying, okay, Coterie, we are going to plan. We are going in with the plan. Then when they got to the place, the imposter is like abandoning the plan. It's like, yeah, let's just go through the front door. Why not? And the second big hit was when Jessica walks into the room and she just flops onto the couch and starts turning on the TV in a way, they didn't.
The funny thing about that too, and we talked a little bit about this, but the funny thing is, from their perspective and anyone from the outside looking in, you guys are like a Rottweiler mixed with like a wrecking ball. Like, you guys just like go for the gusto, and you're very upfront. You're very like, we're just going to go and slaughter everything, or we're going to be a loving pack animal. And so, like, from her perspective, she's like, well, I'm just going to imitate them. She must be like that. And that's the best I've got. So
I was going to say, when has gone into a particular situation and there be a plan? When has it ever stuck? It's like, okay, we're going to go in here. Nah, we're going to just fuck shit up. Okay, well, fuck it. Plan's out the window. That's never happened.
Yeah, so it was pretty fun to watch. And so, that kind of brings us to that session just before, Heinrich had to go and switch gears and basically go work with Seneca Duval. But you guys basically found out where she was staying, but before, you guys had a kind of a run-in and kind of amusing conversations with the hotel staff, because this was like, if you remember, this was like a safe house for vampires, sort of a neutral territory, but a low level one. It was sort of like, it was well known, and generally speaking, as long as it's nothing like the Prince or something, you're going to be okay hiding here. Or if it's like, even like a Sabbat pack or something, like it was protected enough from like the rank and file and from the riprap and any weird things you might run into on the streets. But also, does have, basically if you have someone powerful enough, they can override it, What were you going to say there, Cedar?
Nothing. Never
Oh,
mind.
yeah. So anyway, you guys end up deciding to kind of split the party again, though. You guys some of you go upstairs and rent a room. And then the two gangrel decided to do mist form, and then they went in. So, do you remember that one, Cedar? Where you guys basically went into you found her, and you went into and you started a conversation with her. With Tabby.
Right. We turned into our mist forms and went in some windows and found her, and basically tried to pose as, I think we tried to pose as Sabbat and talk to her about whatever was going on. And I kind of actually wanted to just kind of have a conversation with her and find out more about what she was saying, as far as like what Evan was all about, and what this thing was with the demons and the diamond.
Yeah.
Then of course, John got a little bit impatient, I think, or
Yeah,
Steve got a little.
Steve decided to basically call it out, and started a fight, basically, because he said some stuff that tipped her off, that she's like, wait, what? And she was kind of freaked out anyway that you guys just sort of appeared in her apartment in this supposed safe house. And by the way, in the background, she had, what your characters would come to learn from her later, is that she had been, she was a lover, actually, of Evan. So there was a romantic connection there. She loved also his mind in kind of a sick way, but she knew that the power of this artifact that he seemed to become increasingly infatuated with actually destroying. And so she was, kind of seeing that this item got in there and it got back into her head. She ended up taking and bypassing all of the defenses, removing, breaking them down in the Tremere, and escaping with the gem. Well, she had contacts over on the Sabbat side through her previous dealings that basically allowed her to get in touch with a vampire that you guys would run into later, called the Warden. And he is Shimize, Tizmitzi or whatever, but he is kind of like Jonathan Drake in a way. He's sort of on the outskirts a little bit. Not quite as extreme as Jonathan Drake, but she had heard that he had a lot of experience with extra occult and a very big interest in old world occult in particular, and things of a biblical nature. And so she basically reached out to him, and through an intermediary gave him the gem, and in return he promised to basically keep her safe until they could figure out, and bring her to him officially with the blessing of the bishop. Okay. Well, so she was waiting that word, and then you guys come in, and she has to flee, and decides out of desperation she was going to try and make it to the neutral area of the DC Metro, and then make her way over into basically where the detention facility is, where she knew the warden was. So the way that works is, and that started like, so you guys end up like engaging with her, and she flies out the window. Vincent kind of hears that, decides to make his own window out of the side of the entire building, using his horde form. And there was a chase that you guys go, basically leaping and bounding, or flying through the streets or whatever have you, to go out and get her. Well, at the same time, Jessica, the real Jessica, had finally come to an understanding with the Setites, who basically said, okay, well, now we do trust you. They came up with some rules. Do you remember any of those rules, Jessica?
Yes, amusingly, one of the rules was, okay, they only knew of her having up to the level 2 of the discipline of Serpentis, which is, of course, the tongue. And so they said, well, you can't go further than what you have already done. You can't go past, the serpent's tongue. And she said, and her response was, well, I can certainly promise not to go past the level I have already learned, for I have already mastered the discipline.
They're like, what?
She also, you may have noticed that she threw in a lot of flattery how much she loves the discipline, how fascinating it was,
yep.
And that sort of thing. She also promised not to inform her coterie of the details of what happened, and to this date she hasn't divulged any details. She also promised not to teach anyone the discipline, to which she will adhere to as well, and also to really keep it on the down low as far as displaying this, and so she went so far as to say she's looking into possibly learning obfuscate in order to help further hide the discipline.
Yeah.
Didn't some of the details already slip out of that meeting? Because I seem to remember Vincent telling you that you...
Yes, she did. She did when they finally, and I think this is part of our recorded sessions, when she did finally tell them that they had been with an imposter for a short time. She did tell them that she did tell them that she had been held and it was out of her control. But she did not give any details that she had been harmed, or she did not tell them that she had been stripped naked, that she had been subjected to interrogation. She kind of glossed over what they had actually done, and she stressed and emphasized that the end of the conversation was quite civilized. They had come to an agreement, and all was well.
Okay, because I do remember Vincent. Well, but Vincent asking you if they had harmed you in any way, and that he would make it right if they did.
Yes, and she was very adamant that she was not currently harmed. She was careful in how
but she made it adamant that she wasn't.
Yeah, exactly. Because in her mind, she is not only protecting herself, she is protecting the coterie because she feels that it would be likely fatal if they went up against the Setites.
Well, the entire clan, sure, but the ones that held you captive. Hey, Vincent's got pals too, you know.
I know. But the other thing that she did later, and she did this of her own accord, is that she used one of her boons that she still had to find out who the Setite was, or not the Setite, the member of the Sabbat was that she had diablerized and learned Serpentis from, figuring that was the one who had diablerized their missing clan members. And she did inform the Setites who that was and let them know some information so they could try to figure out what happened to their missing people.
Gotcha.
And she did that as a show of good faith to them, that she is willing to work with them in the future. And she also spoke to them briefly. Again, the coterie doesn't know this part either. That she had spoken to them briefly about the demons, that there is a demonic presence in the city, and they expressed that they are also concerned about the same thing.
All right, and then I was just gonna try and text Steve, but I guess we'll just skip it. But and then you guys, the others, ended up going to meet with the Messiah. Anything memorable from that?
That was dumb. That was just dumb.
Why?
because whenever Vincent has to roll intelligence rolls, he rolls really super good. But anytime he rolls like freaking intimidation rolls, which is, by the way, his specialty, he rolls like shit. Remember, he tried intimidating the one guy at the soup kitchen, and it ended up he failed. He didn't botch, thank God, but he failed miserably. And he's just like, whatever, big guy, get out of my face. I'm like, you suck. These dice suck. But yeah, we Vincent was more concerned of why the Messiah was still even walking, because the last he knew, according to the prince, he was supposed to meet death by sunlight. Mm-hmm. And that's, Vincent was very like, how are you walking right now? How are you? That's when I think we as a coterie started catching on that. I mean, aside from the vampire dump at the barrels that we dumped off, which we later find out was in fact vampires inside. We speculated that there was, but we found out that there was in fact vampires inside there, and we're dropping off to the Sabbat and what we now know as a black spiral dancer. It's at that point is when the coterie started saying, there's something not right with the prince. What the fuck is going on here? So we started delving a little bit more further into that and trying to get as much information on that as we could, which also coincides with all the stuff that, like, approaching Reggie at the party, hey, what's going on? No, not here. And then we do finally, I know I'm skipping a little bit ahead, but when we do finally tell Reggie about it, Reggie's like, close all the drapes like he does in his office at the PD there, and tell me exactly everything. And we laid it out on the line to him, and kind of confirmed a lot of his own suspicions. But again, this all kind of goes back to the Messiah walking around, which I don't think any of us thought that the Messiah was a bad person per se, but we knew the prince wanted him, and at the time we're trying to make it, well, at least Vincent was trying to make good with the prince, considering everything that has happened, and the ultimate sacrifice that Reggie did for the coterie, in spite of what Vincent did. Now Vincent's thinking a little more like, okay, well, I really made some big mistakes here. I'm not going to do that going forward. I need to keep in contact with as much as possible with Reggie. And now I see what Reggie's talking about. I see that there's, something strange is afoot at the Circle K kind of thing,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So then you guys end up, so we fast forward to, PCs are pursuing the Shayna to the nearby metro station. She runs into a pack of Sabbat, which starts a pretty good combat for you guys. You guys end up having this massive, fight, and Jessica, the real Jessica, ends up joining after the fake Jessica ends up exiting stage left. And then basically you guys, force the Sabbat leaders to flee. You guys do a lot of confusing sort of tactics on them, basically being like, hey, look, I have powerful disciplines of, the Sabbat. I am Sabbat. Give her to me. You're standing in my way. And they're like, and some of them buy it, some of them don't. So that was actually a good, one of the good intimidate rolls you had, Rusty, if I recall correctly.
Yes.
But then, you guys ended up getting into it with like they had a female Tizmitsi that gave you guys quite a rough go, but you ended up subduing her. And then also you ended up with between Ward with his newly found technomancy for the thaumaturgy. He was able to stop the doors from opening so she could get actually into the metro station. And and for whatever reason, and we rolled for it. I mean, we legitimately rolled, but it never opened for her, despite her trying. And then eventually, like a couple rounds later, the gangrel actually turned on her and was trying to subdue her for you guys. Everything was very chaotic and confusing, and this pack just sort of disintegrated, really. Because it was so conflicted and because of your roles and your abilities that you were showcasing. So anyway, very dynamic fight, but you guys ended up pulling ahead and ended up actually getting Shayna, and also a certain gangrel as well, who ended up following you guys.
He thought we were cool.
He thought we were some bot. And when he found out, he was in the car and realized just, man, I'm a deep shit.
Mm-hmm. So you guys offer to have him defect. Basically threatened him too. I mean, anyway, you're like, well, you can either defect or we can kill you. So he's like, well, you guys got cookies. Let's see what this is about. And you guys ended up leaving. And so you got Sheena Tabby to the Chantry as well. So now they have her. And let's see here. The gangrel does tell you guys that you guys are now well known in the Sabbat territory. And also your betrayal of Jonathan Drake is well known to the rank and file Sabbat. Once he kind of finds out who you guys really are. But Jessica ends up taking him to her house. It's kind of a common thing. Jessica likes to bring people that are sort of disadvantaged or whatever into her wings, and takes care of them. She does that also with a couple of 14th gen that were hiding from the Scourge. Let's see here. And then Ringill gets a call from the DCPD letting him know that a certain Riley had been found naked and severely abused in every way, and basically was refusing any kind of care, and asked them to contact you and only you. And luckily, he was a kindred, and his partner was a ghoul, and so he did that. He called you using the card that she had. So you want to walk us through what happened next there, Ringo?
Yeah, so I get this call from this kindred policeman, and what had happened is she had passed out in his back seat, and of course, werewolves turn back to their natural form, and because she's a metis, she became Krenos form in the back of his cruiser, and so it was certainly a very curious and tense thing for him to discover, this giant werewolf in his car that was asking for
another vampire.
Your hotshot detective, basically.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, another vampire. And so let's see, I don't exactly remember where I was at the time, but I dropped everything, hopped in, I wasn't in the Corolla. I took the van. That's right. I took the painted up bougie van and picked her up. The guy, swore secrecy, of course, because he didn't want to have to deal with the paperwork and questions and all that. And so, let's see. I got her in the van. And then I believe you guys were in a meeting with Reggie at the time. and was it Reggie who called me, I think? Or one of you called me, I think.
I think
I
we
don't remember
texted.
exactly. But anyway,
I think we texted, yeah.
Yeah, because Reggie asked where I was, and
Yeah.
I kind of alluded to what I had going on, and we met at Jessica's, fancy house, and well, that's a whole interesting other story there. So
Yeah.
we
Please.
get to the S.
This is one Ben hasn't heard yet.
Everybody meets up there, and they're all like, "What the fuck? What the hell happened to her?"
She's on death's door, by the way. As I said, clear signs of
she was
abuse.
almost dead or done. Yeah, she was in a really bad way, and in and out of consciousness. And we hauled her up to one of the bedrooms, and she was bleeding a lot, and she was basically begging Ringil to turn her into a vampire, to turn her, and Ringil was refusing to, and he wanted to try and find some way to try and stop her bleeding and help her heal. But she, of course, told us that she had other werewolves that were probably tracking her and were on her scent and had ways to find her. And
yeah, they were basically in one of their times of hunting her down, and as they were going towards abuse, she ripped off the dick and balls of the main guy, and there is actually a war wound that you get, a scar that you can roll on the werewolf table, and that's what she gave this guy, and then she proceeded to run after being massively wounded on all levels, including with poisonous multi-round sort of damage over time abilities, and so she kind of she ran into sort of the city, and was able to escape using some of her gifts, but she had basically had kind of 6 rounds worth of willpower to remain up, and that was all she had before she would collapse, and so that's when he found her. And they, she had hit as best as she could, but now she, all the defenses were down, and they still had their own rudimentary abilities to track. So she was worried that if they were able to track her, she wouldn't be able, they would come and finish the job. And then also, she feared destroy them. And the only thing she could think to do was to have them kill her and then turn her, because she loved being a vampire, considers herself a vampire anyway now. And basically she thought that would end the tracking. She would die, and then they wouldn't be able to track her anymore, and she could start a new life. And so she was begging them to take her sooner rather than later, and it did take some time. And then enter the other coterie members. Vincent was not present at this one, but all the others were. So what happened then?
Well, so Ringil wanted to try and find some alternative that did not include turning her, because he views his vampirism rather disfavorably. And she
sorry,
didn't know what she was asking for, and the others who were there were Ward, was Jessica there? Yeah, Jessica was there, and Steve, and they were of the other decision. And Ward basically decided, you know what, fuck it, I am going to force the issue. And so he used his blood drain ability to take blood from her to bank it so that she was definitely going to die no matter what we did. And so I tried to attack Ward, out of anger and horror of what he did. And unfortunately, he managed to dominate me and stop me in my tracks. But
As
he hasn't forgiven you yet, Ward. And so, anyway, he wasn't willing to let her die, and so he gave in and gave her the kiss and went through the motions to transform her into a vampire.
Yeah, but one of the things is you need to bury yourself with them, and so you figured that one of the ways you could do that is maybe finding kind of a spiritual site of theirs. But in order to do that, you'd have to drive there. So you guys packed up, and then as you guys were loading the van and getting ready, or the armored vehicle, what happened?
So we hear the howls of the wolves that are hunting her. And so we have to make haste immediately. And Jessica tells all the people that she's housing at her place to go into the panic room and hide, and don't come out unless, until we, come back or whatever. And so we all pile into the armored vehicle, Big Krinos body, dead werewolf, and me, and we tear ass out of there with three werewolves, I think was, on our heels, and through some very fortuitous driving, we pretty much managed to lose them fairly quickly.
Who drove amazing, Ringo? Who drove amazing?
Who almost killed us on the road, you mean, Ward?
Oh, the werewolves almost killed us on the road. Ward brought us home safely.
Safely is an objective word here.
But yeah, you guys
there
do
were
end up losing them.
There were werewolf marks on our car when we were done.
And then you guys end up taking her to Dumbarton Oaks, where the original investigation had occurred, and that's where you buried with her. And at the time she was dead, so she was an object, and you could do your earth meld with her. And so you do that, and then you basically, embrace her that way. But it takes 2 days to do. And then you are not there at the next session, so we just had it. That's why I was like, we'll take an extra day. Sure, why not? I mean, it's, werewolf. And once you killed her, she reverted to the Krinos form. So you guys are, like, hauling around this Krinos form. Luckily, a number of you have potence and pretty good strengths anyway. But you do end up going through and the motions and embrace the werewolf Riley. So let's see. That ends that one. So the next session, the coterie gets intel from Ardog that there was a car. So he was kind of looking into the whole night at the Battle of the Twins. When the prince called down the beam of sunlight, and since it was such a large event with such a huge capability for masquerade breach, obviously he had to look it up. And what you don't know actually is that he was actually tasked to do so by the Archon, since the Archon found out that the prince hadn't specifically requested it. So and that's presumably because the sheriff would have ordered the masquerade and the protection, but he was killed to the final death. Anyway, that was actually one of the times where the Archon came in and told our dog directly as the new sheriff, have you been told to do that? If not, do it, because I consider this to be my most important issue, and I want to make sure that's addressed now. So he was on that, and he did find a car, tinted windows, SUV, black SUV with, it did have a couple of roll down windows. They were able to sort of face recognition software it, and were able to capture some of the people that were in it, particularly one of them that they did some digging, but were told specifically by the prince to not dig anymore and to let it go, and to basically not claim them. And so our dog, seeing a higher authority, actually, and you weren't privy to that particular detail, but basically is like, yeah, we're going to keep looking. And so he tasks you guys with finding a certain human that had been seen, that it was associated with Megadon Technologies or Megadon Pharmaceuticals. And they would also end up having, you guys would end up doing a little bit more research on your own. And now you guys have all these different suspicions where Megadon is now, why were they there at the site when the prince called down this beam of sunlight? And, you guys had just delivered vampires to them. What the hell? Let's do this. Ward had already talked to the Nosferatu as his favor from them to help him with hacking them. So he went and they basically found a kind of an estranged member of the, still worked there at Megadon Pharmaceuticals, but, was kind of estranged and was in the database for the police. And so they were able to basically go and visit this lady. So I don't know if you guys even remember. This is kind of a minor session, really. But it was good because it allowed you to do something. You guys remember what the task was? It was the lady that had all the crucifixes.
Yes.
Oh, yes. Oh, in fact, that's a loose end we needed to clean up at some point. Yes. There was I don't have my notes in front of me, so I don't have the name offhand, but she had made a police report about having seen some unusual things and believed that her employers were possessed or were demonic and something of that nature. And that's why the crucifixes and all. And we determined she was becoming a true believer. Ringle determined that, right?
Yeah. Well, what had happened is that she was actually transporting an item that was demonic in origin, and it tried to take her over, if I remember. While she was driving, right. And she managed to resist it. And I think either she still had it or she knew where it was. And so we were there to try and find out what was going on. And
you were also there to give her the backdoor executable file that Ward had created to help hack into the system when you guys finally made your move. That was the primary reason. But yes, you found out all this.
Everybody else focused on all this silly nonsense about helping the poor and helpless innocent victims of blah, blah, blah. She was a tool. She was a pawn. We were in there to take down Megadon, and she was the easiest door in. We found ourselves an employee to dominate, give specific hypnotic instruction to do the thing that you're not supposed to do, that all that cybersecurity training tells you not to do. Yep. Plug a USB drive into your work computer with some suspicious malware in there, and that was going to give us an edge and a backdoor into their behind their firewall. And then we were going to wipe her memory of ever having seen us because she'd be fairly common, weak-willed human. It was just coincidence that in talking to her, we also discovered that she had some contact with the supernatural already through her employers.
Yeah, and because of that, and recognizing just how very, I guess, what is it? What is the word? Extensive the amount of, I guess, mysticism paraphernalia in her house. Like the salt on the windowsills and the crucifixes all around and the hanging herbs, it screamed to me that, and just the way she was talking to us, that she was pretty much on the verge of being a true believer. And I think one of you might have failed some sort of discipline on her, and she was really starting to get suspicious and afraid. And so that's when I basically blurted out, guys, she's a true believer almost. basically.
Yeah.
I think she's almost a true believer, is what I said. Because,
yeah, basically.
Yeah.
And then that ended that. You guys ended up leaving with her having the thumb drive. And then the other thing, so the next session, Steve is visited by the Megadon reps. So, Jordan Taylor, Dr. Taylor, and the Black Spiral Dancer, both, who's apparently the head of security, had come specifically to visit Steve's armory. You guys were all in tow, with the exception. So at this point, Riley had still had been just awakened. You guys told her to go up into the office above the actual lab there, and you guys had this kind of interesting interaction. This is the last one we're going to do, and then we're going to cut the recording. We have one more to do, but we're going to do it at a later date because it's getting really late. So, what do you guys remember of that episode? Anything interesting for you guys? Tidbits that you learned?
Which encounter? I'm sorry.
The one where the Megadon Pharmaceuticals, where Dr. Taylor and the Black Spiral actually came to the armory that Steven actually owns now?
That actually was the precursor to the one where we visited the lady, because we visited her after we were unable to get a loan with Taylor. Was the big thing, because his bodyguard followed him in, unfortunately. So that was actually a little bit of a precursor there.
Yeah. What do you guys think? Any interesting takeaways there?
So I know that Jessica was upstairs. So she really didn't. She got to see them initially, but she stayed out of sight. So she didn't actually get to be a part of the. Yeah, she was stayed with Riley. She really didn't want them to find Riley either.
Do you guys remember what Steve did?
He did. He looked at the mind.
Yeah, he did sense the sin on them. On specifically Dr. Taylor.
Yes, spectacular successes, I do believe.
Huge amount of successes.
No. Ward got the useful information. Steve got a bunch of flashes of how awful person he is. I got actionable information. Steve got how he spends his Sundays, murdering babies or whatever.
You both got good information.
Well, I suppose if you want to know, he's a baby murderer on the weekends.
Well, I think it helped because a little bit, like I was getting the impression, particularly way back when Heidi was dealing with him, she was like, oh, he's a guy that we can turn. He's a guy that, we could get on our side. He's disgruntled or whatever. And so when you guys did the aura perception at first, you realized, it's human, but it's not quite human. It's like really much more of a clean aura. Like it's a more organized and, maybe darker aura. So, that was sort of a first hint that there's something off. And then with all the information and all the glimpses into his past and evil, frank, human experimentation that he's done, all around, that is just, purely scientific in basis. His religion is science, right? So he's all about like, hey, if I'm sure in his mind, he feels he's doing the right thing. He's like, well, it's for the good of humanity. We need to test all this stuff, but in reality, it's evil as fuck. But he approaches it in very, an analytical way and sees, people not as necessarily individuals, but as, opportunity to provide him with more data for the betterment of humanity, maybe. He's that kind of a person. So that was kind of interesting to be able to divulge to you guys. And then, of course, your part, Ward, which was what? Do you remember?
Well, the aura reading and the telepathy were mostly where I came in, was the more the hard facts. And then I remember that Steve was almost overwhelmed by the messed up. Basically, he keeps messing around with sense the sin and keeps sensing the sin of the wrong people, which is good information, but also very risky because he ends up exposing himself to demonic entities or people like Taylor who associate with demonic entities.
Yes, he does.
Which we found out. We ended up finding a slew of
you want to sense the sin on this? I'm like, whoa. Okay, well, roll. Let me see what that yields, and we'll go from there.
Well, case in point, he sensed the sin on the Black Spiral Dancer, and that's not a good day. Like,
right.
That did not net him anything he really wanted to know.
No. But you're right. He definitely likes to do that. He would do that later, too.
He did. Yeah.
When it wasn't a good idea.
But our broad strokes takeaway from that whole thing was basically we confirmed what we already knew, although in speculation only. We confirmed that the barrels did contain did contain various kindred, including some of them even being the ones that we thought they were. The vampires we had taken down. We confirmed that the prince was involved in all of these activities that violated the masquerade by working with other supernaturals and humans in developing some of these weapons and experimenting on kindred. But we didn't get anything concrete from it.
Yeah,
we didn't get anything.
It was all like stuff hearsay almost, like. You know, it would be basically you telling, the sheriff this, and then him being like, okay, well, you've told me that, but what proof do you have? Hard proof. So you're still running into that problem, and that's what Reggie, under no uncertain terms, told you. But still was good. And then the other thing, too, is you guys got two special kind of ammunition types that they were working on. They being Megadon, that they were looking for, a vampire armory to help them in their manufacture as an agreement with the prince. So you guys were basically a part of that, or at least Steven was. And so one of those was basically UV rounds, right? So it's looking at a material that basically gets shot in, and then it amplifies any and all existing UV, but it also has another part that, much like radiation or radioactive material, gives off UV. So it has like it's a special material, like a crystalline material, that's able to absorb it and then gives it off. And then so it's sort of both of those together that creates sort of its own UV source and can do significant wounds, aggravated damage to vampires. And then also, what was it, silver rounds or whatever that you guys were looking at, a specific material. So those are kind of the sort of two different components that you guys found out. And I think at that, unless anybody wants to say anything about that or that session that really stood out to them, we'll start with that. Is there anything else you guys recall from that session that was of interest?
Let's see. If I remember, Ward discovered in his prying of the dude's head a specific, I guess, compound that he was working on that he lost. That was something that was really kind of near and dear to his heart, I guess.
Yeah,
and,
it was a rage serum. It was a serum that had been apparently developed. You guys would find out later when you hacked Megadon Pharmaceuticals that it was some sort of a serum that inverted sort of your a person's feelings towards another person. So it'd be like, the more you love somebody, if you got this serum, you would turn and it would be like, it would basically have the exact opposite. So if you really hated somebody, you would really love them. If you really loved them, you would really hate them. If you were kind of neutral, you'd still probably remain neutral. So it's like the more neutral you are, it doesn't really matter. But for those that you actually love or have some sort of connection to, it has, psychotropic capabilities to basically turn on your loved ones. And so Ben can maybe recognize that as a tie-in to my Chernobyl game. But anyway, that's what it's alluding to. And yes, he did. It had indeed been lost. That recipe had been somehow, the laboratory that had the serum had the chemical formula, had been corrupted, destroyed, whatever, and it was lost. And he was working with a series of other scientists around the globe, working for Megadon and other pharmaceuticals, trying to recreate it, but we're not having any luck as of yet. So, yes.
And let's not forget one of the names that were on there that Vincent has not found out about yet is Thomas.
Yeah.
Already is also part of that. Which,
part of your
again,
backstory.
Yeah, part of my backstory.
Yeah, and we'll get to that because we're going to talk about the hacking one, but that's going to be the next time. We're going to have kind of a shortened, it's just one page of notes on that one, but that's all the stuff that'll bring us to the modern knights. But we will have to stop here because I have to go. So anyway, thanks guys for the recap session, and I'm going to stop recording, and we'll see you guys later.
Absolutely. I'll see
All right.
you. I'll be back
Night.
this Sunday. You guys.
Night. Yep.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
See ya. Bye.
Later, guys.